Okay. All right. Mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Testing the sounds. All right. Sounds are good. Welcome everybody to As the World Turns. Today is Wednesday, June 20th, 2018. Today we have a great show for you tonight. A lot of things have been going on since last week we spoke. Everything imaginable. So, with that said, we may as well jump on into it. We should have a somewhat of a full panel tonight as the show goes on. Got a lot of topics to cover. So, our first topic this comes from Sputnik News, and this is excuse me. This is Israel did that. U.S. official blames Syria strike on IDF. All right. The article goes, what Sputnik reported earlier as a U.S. led coalition strike on Syria has turned out to be an Israeli airstrike, at least according to one U.S. official who spoke with CNN. Israel, not the U.S., is responsible for an airstrike that killed dozens near the Syria-Iraq border. An anonymous U.S. official said Monday. CNN reported. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, the official told reporters that the Pentagon is going out of its way to publicly make clear that it was not involved in the attack. As Sputnik reported earlier, the Sunday night airstrike targeted positions in the Syrian settlement of Al-Hara, which is southeast of Abu Kamal, near the border with Iraq. An unnamed commander of forces in support of Syrian President Bashar al Assad told Reuters that probably American drones bombed the positions between Abu Kamal and al Tanf. According to Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, 22 of its members were killed, while estimates by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights say the total death toll was 52. Haaretz reported. At 2200 last night, a U.S. plane hit a fixed headquarters of the Popular Mobilization Forces 45th and 46th Brigades defending the border strip of Syria, using two guided missiles, which led to the martyrdom of 22 fighters. Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces said in a statement Monday, demanding an explanation from the United States. Oops. Okay, one moment. Among those killed, at least 30 Iraqi fighters and 16 Syrians, including soldiers and members of loyalist militias. Syrian Observatory Chief Rami Abdel Rahman told reporters. U.S. U.S. Department of Defense spokesman Adrian Rakeem Galloway immediately denied involvement by either the U.S. or the U.S.-led coalition against Daesh in the attack. Not a U.S. nor or coalition strike, Rakeem Galloway said Sunday. No member of the U.S.-led coalition carried out strikes near Abu Kamal. Major Josh Major Josh Jacques, a U.S. Central Command spokesman, told Reuters. According to the anonymous U.S. official who spoke with CNN, the U.S. military is concerned with Iraqi mobilization forces might retaliate against U.S. troops stationed in Iraq, which the which the current government, led by cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, has publicly called an occupation. The official said that the Pentagon is doing everything it can to minimize the risk of retaliatory action. In the meantime, Iraqi's foreign ministry issued a statement in which it expresses rejection and condemnation of any air operations that target forces fighting Daesh, be it in Iraq or Syria, Press TV reported. An Israeli military spokesman refused to comment on the issue. The Jerusalem Post noted Monday, "We do not comment on foreign reports," the spokesperson said. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly said this weekend during his phone calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that Israel will conduct strikes against what it sees as entrenchment by Iran and its allies in Syria. We will take action and are already taking action against the attempted military entrenchment of Iran and its proxies, both close to the border and deep within Syria. He is quoted by the Jerusalem Post as saying, Iran must clear out of all of Syria. The head of the Israeli government added. All right. So it was a lengthy post, but it was very informational and very it a little bit. I sense it a little bit of he say in that. But you sent this article to put on the docket. What are your first thoughts about it?
So what it sounds like to me is that the United States doesn't want to take responsibility for the strike itself. So it wasn't like it was a big F-16 fighter plane that went and struck the Syrian positions. It was actually a Global Hawk, which is one of the heavy drones that carries these big Hellfire missiles. They can blame Israel, and Israel could say, oh well, we don't know anything about it, and then Israel, can basically be untouched because no one's going to go after Israel initially, and the United States can just say, well, it wasn't us. It's a hot potato, cold potato. They just passing the potato around. And the way how I see it is that at some point, and just to actually include this as well, Iraqi military positions were bombed yesterday or last night too.
Okay. Do they know about who, or it's the same old, same old?
Rumor is it could be United States, could be Israel, could be a number of sources, but no one's taking ownership for it.
Now, where I'm looking at the map, where was the Iraqi bases bombed at?
The military was at the border.
At the border of Iraq and Syria?
Yes.
Okay.
So if where your mouse just was, if you can zoom in on that map real quick.
Oh, let me do that. I was just looking at that. What's this? Right here in this area, right?
You might have to zoom in one more time.
Okay. You do.
So right across that river, that's the Euphrates River.
Mm-hmm.
So Iraq has been helping Syria out by bombing some of the terrorists in that area, coming east of the Euphrates.
Okay.
So the United States has 10 military bases lined up from the Jordan border all the way up to the northern part of Syria, all carved out. And these are big military bases where they could bring in the C-130 Hercules cargo planes, as well as these gunships, these helicopter gunships.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that Iraq has been given permission by the Syrian government to come in and start bombing some of these targets, whereas the United States wants to keep the SDF, which is the Syrian Democratic Forces, in these areas untouched. So then Turkey comes down and says we need to clear out these areas of all of the Kurdish fighters, which largely make up the majority of the SDF, which is the Syrian Democratic Forces.
Okay.
So nobody really knows who's wearing these uniforms, because Turkey says that they're terrorists. Iraq is being told that these are ISIS fighters, because there are ISIS fighters in those pockets, but they're not 100% with the United States. They're by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of confusion going on as to who's who on the ground. And the way how the Syrian government sees it is that everybody who's illegally occupying Syria is a terrorist, including the United States.
Okay, everybody, you said anybody who's illegally occupying Syria is a terrorist. That's per who again?
According to the Syrian government, Bashar al-Assad. you're illegally occupying Syria, even if you're a journalist, they're not responsible for you, for one, and two, you are considered to be a terrorist.
Wow. Even journalists. That's wow.
Right, because if you sneak into somebody else's country, then you're illegally there. Right. So in the United States, we have this whole immigration thing where, oh, you know, people are saying, well, you know, well, these people came here illegally. Well, the United States is in Syria illegally. Is anybody gonna, you know, speak about that? They're not just there illegally, but they're occupying. They have 10 military bases inside Syria.
10. Oh my God. And okay. Now,
and to this point,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to finish up 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. To this point, Israel has also attacked what's considered to be Iranian forces inside, outside of Damascus. The reality is, you don't know who's on the ground per se when you attack it. So whether or not it's Iranian forces is left to be seen, because you can't really identify them from the air anyways. And once their bodies are blown to bits, there's no real way to perform forensics to identify who it is. The idea here is that they can justify bombing Syria because they say that they're in opposition to Iranian forces being positioned in Syria. Well, now that there was never really Iranian forces there, but now that Iranian officers who are legally invited into Syria are actually leaving, why are you still bombing Syria?
That's a good question. Now, excuse me, Syria's geography, is it like Afghanistan or Iraq, or is it more smoother?
Syria is mostly made up of desert. The only mountainous areas are around the northern part of Syria, as well as the Golan Heights.
Northern part, okay.
So the further up you go up north, the more I think there's some elevation to it that allows snow to build up. So when the winter time does come in, it does get
cold.
There is some snow on the ground.
Now
there's some snow there.
Now that area of I'm just thinking here, that area of Syria would be, in my opinion, would be more of a prime area to occupy, since it's not as smooth and it's higher up. It's a mountainous region there.
Oh, so you're saying that who would have the advantage here? Who would you say is having the advantage?
I would say America.
Well, America and the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, are actually occupying the gas and oil refineries inside Syria. So that's what the reason for the occupation is for. So if you take away the natural resources and the water filtration facilities around the river, right? Because that's where they get their water from.
The Euphrates, right?
Then the Euphrates River that comes down from Turkey into Syria. What they want to do is choke these utilities and make the Syrian government say, okay, we'll surrender. But that's not going to happen, because according to the Syrian government, Bashar al-Assad, just the other day, he said he vows to take back every inch of Syria, including by the end of the war.
And this area right here, what I'm pointing to is I start with the J.
Euphrates.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's a prime area right here, because I'm guessing. Well, the reason I say that is because it looks like there's a town right near this area, and a road goes through here, so it has to be. I'm guessing it's populated, and the Euphrates go through here, and looks like it's a little widening of the river right here. But I'm thinking there's a lot of action going on right here, because this is the south part of my mouse is Syria, and the Northern part of my mouse is Turkey. That's what I'm guessing.
Right. There's Kurdish fighters, what you call YPJ and YPG. YPG is the men's military, and the YPJ is the ladies' military, a wing of the Kurdish Republic of Syria and Iraq. The Turkey's security, Turkey's threat intelligence considers these Kurdish fighters along the Turkish border to be terrorists. Now, the YPG and the YPJ combined make up 45,000 paramilitary fighters.
Wow.
So they have all the American tanks, they have all the American weapons, they have all of the mortars and everything else to defend themselves. And from what it sounds like, from some of the documentaries and some of the news reports I've seen, is that they are very skilled fighters, so they can basically take down the Syrian government or the Turkish government if they had to.
Okay.
And that goes for the women too. The women are extremely skilled fighters.
Yeah, because you said both branches make up 45,000 in total, right?
Yeah, just about 20,000 men and something like 15 to 16,000 women or something to that effect.
That's man. So all of them are dead. That's good to hear that both, male and female parts are dedicated to this, and they skilled fighters. They're not, like we mentioned about Yemen, guys with sandals in the mountains. No, they skilled fighters, and that is impressive.
Right, they were trained by the United States military.
Now, what is this area? This green area? I'm guessing that's fertile land. Up here by what's this? Syria, Turkey. Yeah, the Syria, Turkey, and Iran border right here. Do you know?
That should be the Kurdish People's Republic.
Okay. Kurdish People's Republic. Is there any action going on here?
Yeah, it's been carved out. So it's been like that since the 90s, or since the 80s, I would say. And if you go back to the Desert Storm War, one of the first areas that Saddam wanted to hit was the Kurdish People's Republic up there, and he gassed them. At the same time, he was fighting Kuwait and close to Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
They have oil repositories inside that region that they use to build their wealth. So basically, the oil really belongs to Iraq, but they're actually funneling the oil out and shipping it to Turkey at a small price, and that's how they survive.
Is that the reason why he want the gas? Why he want the bomb and the white gas, because to get rid of their source of wealth?
No, it's because they're pretty much racist. Turkey's racist against the Kurdish fighter, the Kurdish people. The Iraqis are racist against the Kurdish people, as well as Syrian government is pretty much racist against the Kurdish people. The problem is Kurdish people don't have an actual state. They're kind of like African Americans. They've put in all this labor all these years, but they never got any reparations or restitution. So they just exist within the framework of the state itself, whether it's Syria, Iraq, or Turkey. So they don't have any real political representation. So that's why they had to form YPG, YPJ, as well as what do you call that? The Kurdish People's Republic.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, I'm learning. I see. Yeah. Okay. Now, any other points on this topic? I'm gonna see anybody join us. No. Any more points on this before we move on?
No, that's fine.
I'm starting to see the I guess you could say the pawns. As you explained, I look at the map. Just like down here, you was talking about the Syria and the Iraq border, and obviously, yeah, you want people are going to be where there's some type of resource, and this is water, the Euphrates. So a lot of action is going to happen around there. It doesn't seem as complex as it did when we first started out. I'm starting to use a lot more common sense and I guess ask the right questions, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, keep in mind that ISIS originated inside Iraq, right? So they came from Iraq and crossed the border into Syria. So as the Iraqi fighters, the PMU, which is the Popular Mobilization Units, consisted of Afghani fighters, Iranian fighters, Iraqi fighters, as well as what's the other country? Pakistani fighters as well. They make up the large portion of the new military for the Iraqi government. It's about 100,000 of them. Now those guys have chased out ISIS fighters from Iraq last summer and basically forced them into Syria. So now that the Syrian government is pushing back from the west of the Euphrates to the east, those guys are kind of locked in to these areas.
Okay.
But in those areas are made up largely of U.S. military, British military, NATO forces inside Syria. So if they're being chased around NATO areas, then what happens is you can't bomb them because they're hiding in largely in the regions of or the radius of NATO conscripts.
Okay, cool. I'm learning. All right, our next, make sure. Okay, our next article comes from Al Jazeera, and title is Saudi UAE coalition enters airport compound of Yemen's Hodeidah. Did I pronounce that? Hodeidah. Excuse me. Losing Hodeidah. Go ahead.
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Losing.
It's really Hodeidah.
Hodeidah. Cool. Thank you. Losing Hodeidah would weaken Houthis rebels by severing supply lines from Red Sea port to their stronghold in Sana'a. Hodeidah, right? Hodeidah. Okay. The battle between the Saudi and the Emirati-led coalition and Houthi rebels has entered the main compound of Yemen's Hodeidah airport, according to the Yemeni military source and resident. Saudi and UAE-backed forces stormed the gates of the airport on Tuesday, according to sources on the ground, while Houthis used tank, artillery, and mortar fire to shell the inside of the airport. They have stormed the airport, a Yemeni military source told Reuters news agency. The facility was stormed after fierce battles broke out early in the morning between coalition forces and Houthi fighters who hold the main port city of Hodeidah. On Monday, Saudi and UAE Apache attacked helicopters, pounded Houthi positions as civilians fled in search of shelter from the biggest battle of the war in 3 years. The attack reportedly targeted Houthi snipers and fighters positioned on rooftops of schools and homes in the Manzar neighborhood near Hodeidah's airport compound, residents said. And fighting that has wounded dozens of civilians and prevented aid organizations from reaching the parts of the city. While most of the intense fighting is in Hodeidah, Houthi media reported more than 40 airstrikes in other parts of Yemen over the past 24 hours. Losing Hodeidah would significantly weaken the Houthis by severing supply lines from the Red Sea port city near or to their stronghold in the capital, Sana'a, and possibly depriving an estimated 70% of the population of access to food and medicine. It could also give an edge to the Western-backed Saudi and UAE-led coalition, despite superior weaponry and firepower, has failed to defeat the Houthis in a war that has killed 10,000 people and created the world's most urgent humanitarian crisis. Speaking to Al Jazeera, Sami Hamdi, editor-in-chief of the International Interest, highlighted how essential the city's airport and seaport are for the coalition forces and the Houthis. The Houthis' gamble has always been that as long as they can stay in Sana'a and Hudaida, then international pressure will force Saudi Arabia to table to the table to discuss negotiations. Taking the airport and seaport are absolutely fundamental for the coalition forces because this is the battle that will cut off the lifeline of the Houthis. If Hudaida is taken, there will be a severe weakening of the Houthis' position, and it may very well force the Houthis into a fight for survival, which may take them time, which may, which may, which may make them take negotiations more seriously. The battle for Hudaida, launched 7 days ago, could drag on, inflicting more suffering on civilians who have already endured air raids, port blockades, hunger, and a cholera epidemic. In a post on social media late on Sunday, Anwar Gargash, the UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, said the coalition victory in Hudaida will put the Houthis back to the negotiation table. Grave worry. Tens of thousands of residents have fled the fighting along Yemen's western coastline, where pro-government fighters backed by the Saudi-led coalition are engaged in fierce battles with Houthi rebels. Stephanie Dujarric, a spokesperson for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, told, told reporters on Monday that about 5,200 families, or around 26,000 people, have sought safety within their own districts or in other parts of Hudaida govern, governorate. The number is expected to increase as hostilities continue, he said. Earlier, UN Human Rights Chief Zaid Adal Hussein voiced concern that the Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates led military operation in Yemen could endanger millions of civilians. I emphasize my grave worry regarding the Saudi and Emirati-led coalition ongoing attacks in Hudaida, which could result in enormous civilian casualties and have a disastrous impact on life-saving humanitarian aid to millions of people, which comes through the ports, Al Hussein said on Monday. As he was speaking on the opening session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, where he gave an overview of the overall human rights situation while denouncing the threat of growing chauvinistic nationalism around the world. All right. Now, I've heard some of this doing looking at YouTube videos. I heard that there was a man-made hunger outage, strike, something going on in Yemen, and I did hear that about, I think they said it, but a good portion, a vast majority of the aid comes through the seaport of Aden. I think it said Aden. And if, like the article said, if that gets cuts off, then it forces the Houthis to come to the table with Saudi Arabia. Am I correct in saying all of some of that?
You would be correct in saying that, and the idea is to choke the lifeline from the Houthis. So the Houthis are actually um the name of the name of the people. So
Mm-hmm.
it'd be similar to something like the Black Panther Party.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the thing is, if you can't beat them with all the weapons that you have, then I don't think that starving them out is really going to do them any good, because they'll eat dirt before they submit to you.
Now, how long do you think that'll last?
What do you mean?
If they, it sounded like from the article that they were um, that they were successful in cutting off the airport. I don't know about the seaport. Were they successful cutting off the seaport, or is that still going on?
I believe so. I think the UAE had already taken the airport, but the seaport, it would be a little bit more difficult because the Houthis have the ability to shoot missiles at these slow moving ships.
Okay.
They hit last year. They hit one UAE boat before, military boat before it almost sank it.
Okay. Now, let's say both the seaport and the airport are out of commission. Yemen's geography is mainly desert and rock and mountains. That's from what I can see, and this is not a good dictation, but there's not a lot of farmland to farm the amount of vegetables or graze, for them to stay functioning with food. So if both the airport and the seaport are choked off, I understand, yes, you got to do whatever you got to do, including eating dirt. But how long do you think that'll last?
Well, they've been holding out since 2015, so
they're doing something. Right.
Well, they're pretty they're pretty resilient people. So war is nothing new to them. They've been fighting since the dawn of time, and no one's ever won a war inside Yemen. So I suspect that Saudi Arabia will eventually have to come to the table to negotiate some form of strategy, because they also don't want to lose to the UAE, because the UAE has already taken the airport. And whoever takes the airport, because gas and oil inside Yemen that can be highly exploited if the UAE decides to get in there and try to exploit it.
Okay, so it's like a race to get the land between Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
Yeah, whoever can control the resources will be the victor. You have to remember they also share a border with Oman. Mm-hmm. So if push came to shove, they could race across the border and actually get support from food support from Oman. So
now some parts of Oman is pretty modern. Like, well, I'm thinking about Muscat. That's a long ways away, but yeah, they could. Now, do Oman have a player in this?
They're neutral. Allegedly, they're neutral. However, they've been accused of shipping weapons to Yemen in the past. So I think the UAE wants to take control over these, the airport, as well as one of the islands off the coast of Yemen, to position themselves for the big push. But I don't know if I don't see them actually going toe to toe with the Houthi fighters, because this is not a conventional fight, right? It's not a conventional military fight where there's two battle tanks on the field and things of that nature. You're dealing with street battles where you have to go from building to building, block to block.
Now I'm thinking that Oman, if Yemen is taken over, let's say that hypothetically Yemen is taken over, Oman would. Oh, I'm thinking Oman would have some type of, it will say to itself, okay, if Yemen is taking over, then who's next? Then I would say, yeah, they have something to gain by secretly shipping weapons to Yemen and the Houthis to stave off Saudi Arabia and the UAE, because if Yemen fall, then Oman will be next, I'm thinking.
Well, keep in mind that Oman is actually is neutral in all of this, but the former president of Yemen actually fled to Saudi Arabia to hide because the Houthi rebels were going to actually take him down. So he requested help from the Saudi government. That's how Saudi Arabia got involved. So Oman is kind of a could be a wild card, but they're a neutral player in all this, and they don't want the conflict coming into their area, so they'll stay hands off from it.
Okay. So right now, the airport has been bombed and seized by the UAE.
Right.
And since the airport has been taken by the UAE, we could almost safely say then Saudi Arabia will push more to seize the seaport of Aden because they don't want the UAE to seize both the airport and the seaport.
That's correct. And don't forget that the UAE and Saudi Arabia are not on equal footing either.
What do you mean by that?
There's a bit of political conflict between the two.
Okay. Now,
the UAE has been funding Hezbollah inside Lebanon, which is in direct conflict with Saudi Arabia and Israel. So,
because I was going to ask if they were working together to disrupt the supply chain in Yemen. I'm guessing they're not.
Well, Yemen has the capability to disrupt all anything coming up the Red Sea. So that's why Yemen is such a hot topic, because if Yemen can shut down the Red Sea, that means nothing can pass through, no goods can pass through Europe.
Okay, now that brings up some more questions for me. The first question, the Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not working together to seize Yemen. Are they or are they not?
They are, but they're two people of similar interests without being friends, right?
Okay.
So
you say, well, what was it saying? You have limited interest.
You have permanent friends, but not permanent. I mean, you got permanent interest, but not permanent friends.
Right. Okay. And we see that playing out in Yemen. Now, Yemen is right across the Red Sea from Djibouti. And we know Djibouti is full of foreign military bases. Now, how on earth will Yemen disrupt trade through the Red Sea, coming through the Red Sea, and these military bases in Djibouti not doing anything about it?
Well, there's a reactionary force. Those are really reactionary forces. They're just firefighters. They're not actually, there's not like they can just come into the Red Sea. I mean, not coming to the Red Sea, but come into Yemen and actually and do something, because they don't have the capabilities to do that. They're really for anti-piracy operations in the Red Sea in case one of the ships get hijacked.
Okay. So if Yemen scave off both Saudi Arabia and UAE and start to disrupt trade ships going through the mouth of the Red Sea, then these foreign reactionary forces on these bases in Djibouti, but then stop all that.
That's their position. So you have Japan and the Americans, the French, the British, China, as well as UAE. You have quite a few, about 8 military powers inside that little pocket of the Horn of Africa. So as it stands, I mean, I don't think that Yemen is going to hijack any ships, but if you shut down their ports, I mean, yeah, there's a high probability that they may get into piracy and hijack a vessel in order to save themselves, because that brings everybody to a negotiating table now.
Now, could this vessel contain some type of food? Because I'm thinking that would be the logical way. Well, logical.
You actually broke up. I didn't understand you.
Now I'm saying this vessel that if Aden supply chain is seized by either Saudi Arabia and UAE, and the Yemenis, the Houthis, goes into piracy and sees a boat coming up through the mouth of the Red Sea, I'm thinking that it's more than likely that that boat will contain some type of food on it.
Oh, so let's put this into perspective. UAE is a mercantile state, so they ship a lot of goods out, and they have to come through the Red Sea. So they have a vested interest in making sure that the shipping routes are actually clear and free of any piracy, including the hostilities going on in Yemen.
Okay.
So Saudi Arabia has oil that comes through from Aramco up through the Red Sea as well. So they have a vested interest in making sure that the shipping routes are clear. Then you factor in the Chinese and you factor in the Japanese, who have also Toyotas and Hondas and things like that that come up through the Red Sea. So everybody has a vested interest in making sure that the shipping routes are clear. Yemen, however, will use those shipping routes to actually choke the rest of those countries who have aided against their who are aiding and abetting against their what they consider to be their free will. They'll shut all that down, and because they have the weapons to do so.
Okay, so it doesn't matter what the ship is holding. If it's a ship, shut it down. Gotcha. Now you said, I think you said Saudi Arabia has occupied some islands outside of the city of Aden, right? Or am I mistaken?
As a UAE actually occupies some of those islands.
UAE outside of okay. Now it seems to me they would be in they would be in prime position to seize the seaport of Aden, since they occupy an island outside of Aden.
Yeah, but it looks easy on the map, but what happens when you put your boots on the ground? You step on some IEDs, and next thing you know, you done lost 5,000 fighters within the first week. As soon as you touch down,
you got a point.
They can't hold it either. I mean, how long can they hold those ports for? Because now you're in between the ocean and little strips of land. I mean, the Houthis have the high ground against you. So as soon as you get off that boat and you try to take the ports, you may be there for the first 5 minutes, but you're gonna get
mortared or something.
Right, you're gonna have all types. I mean, we don't know how many booby traps are set up inside those ports.
Man, we need a big screen showing all this to move pieces around. I closed it out. Was there anything else you want to say about that?
No.
All right. We get into our boy Trump. This is from Time.com from June 19th by Justin Warland. And the title says, "Why Trump's trade war with China is so risky." All right. President Donald Trump's looming trade war with China ratcheted up so quickly you might have missed it. It did. It really did. Over the weekend, Trump engaged. Okay, man, this guy is hilarious. Over the weekend, Trump engaged in a back and forth with the country that ultimately led him to threaten tariffs on 450 billion of Chinese imports. "We have to," Trump told reporters Friday. "We've been treated very unfairly." For Trump, who has declared trade wars easy to win, the escalating tariffs represent the fulfillment of a campaign promise to crack down on China and reduce the U.S. trade deficit to support U.S. jobs. But most economists, business leaders, and trade experts on both sides of the aisle have cried foul, arguing that trade wars are a dangerous game that could hurt the economy at home and around the world. The prospect of a trade war is particularly dangerous when it comes to China, the U.S. largest goods trading partner. Products from the country are integrated into global supply chains, and the U.S. sends the country billions of dollars worth of agricultural products, vehicles, and machinery each year. That position, along with the authoritarian nature of its political system, gives China significant leverage to stay the course in any trade war. The country's tariffs on 34 billion in goods announced on June 5th targeted industries in politically sensitive places, soybean farmers in Iowa, U.S. automakers in the Rust Belt, and orange juice in Florida. People in those swing states are taking notice. If we lose trade to China, our neighbors to the south will be glad to take up that trade, says John Heisdorfer, a soybean producer from Iowa and president of the American Soybean Association. That's not to say that China is blameless. Trump's June 15 tariffs came in response to a months-long investigation that documented trade practices from forcing U.S. companies to share trade secrets to subsidizing. Wait a minute, I read that wrong. That's not to say that China is blameless. Trump's June 15 tariffs came in response to a months-long investigation that documented trade practices from forcing U.S. companies to share trade secrets to subs- subsiding domestic industries, which have been widely condemned as unfair. China seeks to acquire the crown jewels of American technology, says Peter Navarro, a White House trade advisor. This is the kind of thing that needs to be addressed. But most economists generally say that tariffs are the wrong way to tackle the issue. The rollout of this latest set of actions was quick and decisive, leaving little opportunity to negotiate. On June 15, Trump announced tariffs on 50 billion worth of Chinese imports. Within minutes, China responded in kind, targeting a range of goods from soybeans to electric vehicles, and prompting Trump 3 days later to order his trade office to find another 200 billion worth of Chinese goods to target. Preemptively, Trump said he would be willing to bring the total value of Chinese goods targeted with tariffs to 450 billion. China has a fairly predictable pattern of responding immediately and with pretty stiff tariffs, says John Kirk, U.S. Trade Representative under President Obama and now a partner at the law firm Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. Whenever you get in this tit for tat escalation and retaliation, it generally is not good. Perhaps most importantly, the fast moving nature of the back and forth means it will be difficult to halt. Negotiations for a brokered truce with China have all but stopped, Navarro says. Our phone lines are open, and trade officials are stretched thin dealing on other fights with Canada, Mexico, and a raft of European countries. We have a front open. Uh, we have a front opened up on the EU, China, and NAFTA, says Carlo Gutierrez, U.S. Secretary of Commerce under George Washington Bush and the chair of the Albright Stonebridge Group. That's pretty much the world economy right there. It may not have felt the pinch of a trade war yet, but experts say that barring big shifts in direction, large swaths of Americans will get hit. To understand the effects of tariffs, look no further than washing machines and solar panels. The price of laundry equipment has spiked 17% in the last 3 months after years of decline, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, and more than 2.5 billion in U.S. solar projects have been scrapped thanks to the tariffs, according to a Reuters analyst. Meanwhile, markets have responded poorly to Trump's tariffs play, dipping repeatedly with each new tariff announcement. Even an internal report from the White House Council of Economic Advisors reported by the New York Times found that Trump's trade agenda will hurt the U.S. economy. At the same at the, at the same that don't sound right. At the same, Trump's tax cuts and higher spending have actually exacerbated the trade deficit, which he ostensibly hopes to reduce with his trade agenda. Look, I have always said a trade deficit doesn't matter, former Trump advisor Gary Cohn said at a White House Post event last week. In many respects, it's helpful to our economy. But Trump has remained determined to implement his trade agenda in contrast to his vacillations on other political issues. And he is counting on the getting tough on China plate to deliver a win for his base and give Republicans a boost in the midterm elections. The question now is whether economic effects will be felt by then as well. All right, that was a pretty lengthy one, but I really understood it. They're saying that okay, with these terrorists really did escalate within a few short days. It got serious real fast. Uh, but they're saying, I even heard that aluminum and steel prices have spiked also. But they're saying these tit for tats. Okay, you put a tariff on me, I put a tariff on you, and back and forth. They're just gonna they're just going the people that are going to be hit hard by this is the American people. And this tit for tat isn't good because a you have you trade you have a lot of Chinese goods coming in, and a lot of American companies build goods based on these Chinese goods. So when this tariff comes in, you're taxing and stuff, and these goods are now at a higher price. You you run the risk of putting these a lot of American businesses out of business. So that's what I'm getting from this.
Well, it's more of a who's going to blink first, right? So who's gonna back down first? And Trump's one of those guys who just doesn't back down because of his ego. However, you're playing games with the Chinese when you don't have the upper hand, and the Chinese can hold out. You know, they can resell those goods back to Europe or back to Latin America or Africa, and still make profit. The problem is the United States can't do that.
The show can. It actually did say that China can sell to other people, and they can hold out a little bit longer than America.
Yeah, because all that stuff is all backwards compatible, anyways. It's not like, oh, if you you sell some car batteries or something like that, or some batteries for cell phones and laptops and stuff like that. That stuff can be resold in other places. It's not like it's proprietary to the United States.
Yes.
And Trump thinks that he can see he's openly racist. So the thing is he's saying, well, China's been raping us and using this type of language, and on the political stage. But to the Chinese, they're like, well, that's just a part of business. You transfer your technology to us, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the way we do business. That's the way how we've always done business. But for Trump is looking at this as, this is a loss, weak position to be in if you're a white capitalist, right? If you're a white capitalist, you're being ripped off by these chinky-eyed people. And the thing is, Chinese are going to hold out. They can hold out for a long time. I mean, ZTE as a company, yeah, they buckled under pressure when Trump put the tariffs on them and actually put the sanctions on them. But the rest of those companies can survive.
So, looking to the future, how long do you think Trump can keep this going? Knowing what we just said, yes, China can sell all this to other countries, and America has these tariffs going on with Canada, the EU, and other countries, not just China. Trump is pushing us into a isolationist. We've been isolated from the rest of the world in terms of trade. How long can this keep going on? Because, like you said, he's Trump. So, yeah.
Well, he being Trump, I believe it was forecast that this was only supposed to take place for 90 days or so, but it's past 90 days now. And and this also leads into the North Korea nuclear deal, the Iranian JCPOA. What's the other deal on the that was on the table? The United Nations HCR or HRC, Human Rights Council, the G7. The United States as a political power can't seem to hold deals. They can't make good on deals. Whether it's in their best interest or it's in somebody else's best interest, they can't seem to hold a deal. And Trump is making this, a part of their a part of their whole entire makeup on a political front. It doesn't make sense if you're trying to do business. If you're trying to get North Korea to denuclearize, well, why would they denuclearize if you've been pulling out every other deal and you've been sabotaging China all these weeks? What's the point?
Yeah, we spoke about that. We spoke about that before because they backed out of the Iran deal, and we spoke about that when that happened. You supposed to be doing a nuclear deal with us, but the same nuclear or somewhat similar nuclear deal you do in other country, you backed out of. So what? How am I supposed to believe you're not going to do the same thing with us?
Right, it's real shady business, and it's just going to make the United States look even worse when it comes down to comes time to go to the table. Is no one's going to take you seriously.
Oh. Now I'm interested to, because with these tariffs, the real people that's going to lose out are American workers and American companies. And we all know American companies are, compared to the things they produce, is not to the point of Chinese imports. And you have these Chinese imports coming in, like I said, they're coming in at a higher price. So now these companies to stay afloat, they're gonna have to fire people, not hire people. I'm thinking this could bring on the next recession. These tariffs, the longer they prolong.
Say that one more time.
The longer these tariffs prolong, these Trump tariffs prolong, I'm thinking they can bring in, well, they can spur the next recession.
They could, but they wouldn't be the total cause, because the recession was going to come anyways. This is just gonna be a fastball right down the middle.
That's a good point. Now, do you think it'll exacerbate things, make things worse because of these tariffs?
I think the idea that Trump has is to force Americans to build their own stuff, right? Not be reliant on China. But it's hard to compete against Asian labor because, one, they work twice as many hours, and two, they work for 1/5 of the pay that you would actually get in the United States. Mm-hmm. So how do you compete against something like that?
You really can't, unless you import a lot of Mexicans.
Well, even if you did that, right, it still doesn't put Americans to work.
Sure don't.
Right, because right now you have people out there marching in the street protesting for a livable wage, right? $15 an hour or $20 an hour, whatever it is. Well, if you're trying to compete skill set for skill set, labor for labor, it's impossible to compete against China when they're working for 1/5 of your pay in twice as many hours.
Yeah, and oh man, it sounds like I keep saying this, but this perfect storm word, but it sounds like it because you have this starting influx of automation and AI, which is going to replace some jobs in the beginning. So a lot of people are not going to be working, getting more jobs. And oh my goodness, I'm a millennial.
Good evening, gentlemen.
What's going on, Complex?
Hey, what's going on, bro?
Chilling, man. Chilling.
Yeah, we've been feeling the pinch for so long because so many of us can't get jobs, still live home with our parents and go ahead.
Yeah, multi-generational living.
Right. And the Generation Z, Generation X, millennials, Generation Y. So Generation Z are coming of age. They're 18. They're turning 18 this year. They're getting to the workforce. So it's gonna happen. You know what I mean?
It's gonna be a gig economy. You're gonna have to create your own work and your own grind and your own hustle.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's a combination of gig economy, UBI, entrepreneurialism, and traditional part-time work.
It's a lot,
right? It's gonna be like a hodgepodge or a mix of all of those things. You know, kind of speak to what you were talking about, Lionel, in terms of like, you know, Trump kind of turning the nation isolationist. Mike was mentioning, you know, a lot of that is largely to spur growth here domestically. Is to get manufacturing going and all of that. Now, to what degree or what extent, that remains to be seen. I don't know if you guys covered, or I guess this is it right here, the $200 billion tariffs.
Yeah, I was just bringing it up because it into what we just talking about.
Yeah, because I mean that you're escalating the discussion quite substantially when you go into that video. We'll just preface it, but I won't go into the details. I'll let the video talk about it.
Well, I'm not gonna play the sound.
Oh, okay. Oh, just largely though, but yeah, with the $200 billion, I mean, basically Trump said, all right, if you guys make good on the $34 billion tariff package that you retaliated on us against, we'll then levy a $200 billion tariff package against you.
Now, to give people what you just said, he's what you just said, 34 billion. That's China levying a 34 billion tariff on American imports, and
right.
Trump saying, well, if you do that, then we'll do a 200 billion
right
tariff on your imports.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the interesting part about it though was that the $34 billion tariff package that China slapped on the U.S. was in response to the $50 billion tariff package that we put on China. So we put $50 billion on them, right? And then basically China said, all right, well, look, we're gonna hit you guys with a strategic $34 billion tariff package. Right. I mean, people looked at the numbers and they gawked a little bit. They was like, why didn't China like at least match them? It's like, well, because China's smarter than that. Don't be fooled by the numbers. It's where the tariffs go. It might be a lower number, but it has a greater effect on U.S. imports in China, as opposed to say the $15 billion on the tariffs that the United States slapped on China. China looks at that and merely says we have workarounds for that. Now, in response to the $34 billion tariffs, because we know that they have workarounds for the $50 billion tariffs, which really wouldn't have any effect, Trump tripled or quadrupled. In this case, if we go from 50 to 200, he quadrupled down and said, well, if you impose those $34 billion tariffs, we're going to slap you with $200 billion. Now you're really raising the stakes.
And like you said, and like you and me and Mike just said, China has a workaround around that, because those terrorists really won't hurt China as much as Trump thinks.
God, I think you guys were. I was listening in and out because I was dealing with my daughter and stuff. So I think you guys basically touched on the core of it all. It's that, you know, Trump doesn't really know what he's. Well, Trump and his administration, I don't think they really know how China's positioned. I really don't think they know how China's positioned and leveraged.
But that. I want to use a word, but I'm not going to use it. That doesn't make sense, because
use it.
If we talking about it and we see it, then how come they're not seeing it?
They do. They do, but they're trying to play out, see how far they can take this, right? Usually you can kind of take the trade war to about 90 to 100 days or so before the next quarter or the next fiscal is up for most of these companies. But China is has a surplus of goods that are manufactured that they can redistribute to other back channels, such as Europe, such as North Asia, Central Asia. Well, not typically Australia, because Australia has its own particular proprietary market, but Africa dump a whole bunch of these surplus goods onto Africa for cheap money, you recoup your money back and laugh in the United States' face and say, "Ha ha."
Look, why? Look. Instead of just sending it here, send it to, I don't know. You can send it to. I'm trying to think what countries you can send it to, because China. There was a list of them. So, like for example, some of the bikes that I get, right, they come from China, but there's one company I source them through. I source it through Canada. So there's back channels to get stuff. All they got to do is just take inventory and stick it in another country, and then basically tell their suppliers or their U.S. importers or dealers, yeah, get it from these guys over here. And you're right. You're around the tariffs.
Well, don't forget that the United States also has tariffs on Canada, Mexico. So
yeah,
even United States cousins and buddies and neighbors are not safe from the tariffs.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. Now that I'm really starting to see it kind of play out, bigger picture, like the U.S. has gone full isolationist. Like they even insulated themselves from Mexico and Canada being used as back channels. That's why like the Canadians and the Mexicans are like, dude, what gives? They're like, the Trump administration is just kind of like, just in case the Chinese try to just dump their shit off on you guys, and then you just send it right across the border.
Well, they also hit Canada with the auto tariffs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And dairy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Canadian ham, Canadian bacon.
Oh, man, the price of pizza.
Bacon. Oh, yeah, that's good. I can't. I gotta have my Canadian bacon on my Domino's pizza. Wait, check this out. I gotta have my Canadian bacon in my Panda Express.
Wait, Canadian bacon in
Canada, China.
Yeah.
You know what? This sounds like one of them highbrow NPR podcasts when I just said that.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good, man.
I like
it. There's nothing wrong being highbrow.
Well, let's throw another wild card in there as well. Don't forget the Dakota Access Pipeline was originally supposed to be routed to China from Canada.
The one in North Dakota?
Yeah.
The one
Dakota Access Pipeline.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be going to China. It was the United States that disrupted that whole entire thing, which is how you got the pipeline into North Dakota in the first place, or South Dakota in the first place.
Was it going to run through Siberia?
Excuse me?
I guess what was it, run through Siberia or something?
No. It will go to the port of
oh wait, they would run it
to Yukon.
Yeah, they would run it off the port. Where is that? Off the West Coast?
Hold on, let me bring up a map.
Yes.
Oh, so they were going to run that pipeline over to the coast and then shoot across the the Bering Strait? I think that is.
Not shoot across the Bering Strait, but set up shipping routes to bring the bring the oil.
Oh, okay, like just a straight up port.
China had.
Got you.
China had already paid for it.
Oh, damn. Okay, I didn't know this.
Okay. So I got the map. They were going to take the oil from North Dakota.
Got to go. Yeah, go up. Yeah, and you're going to go across like Alberta.
Okay, they're going to go this way.
They're going west
to what? Through Alaska or something?
Through Yukon territory.
Through the Yukon.
Through the Yukon territory.
Right.
To a port here somewhere, you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
That is a long pipeline.
No. Go back down. You're talking about the Pacific Ocean. So
no. Yeah, go downward.
Okay, you got North Dakota.
It didn't start in North Dakota. It actually originates in Canada.
It originates in Canada as it is now. It starts in Canada, like in the tar sands. I'm trying to remember where that is, and then it goes down across the border into the U.S. down into the Dakotas. Right. That's where it goes. But what Mike's saying is it originally actually was supposed to go west, not south.
Right. During the
I didn't know that. That the Chinese had already paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. Hmm.
You know, a lot of news, or a lot of information here.
Yeah, the Chinese want their money back, but can't get their money back.
They want
So
their money back
just,
from Canada.
Not so much as from Canada, but from the whoever brokered the deal in terms of the oil.
What was that? That was the what was that called? There's the partner name for that project. There's a name for it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, because I remember the riots going on and picketing going on around it a couple years ago.
Yeah. Well, the thing was that when it was coming down, when they just so apparently when they decided to change the route, right? Instead of it being Chinese, it was going to be a U.S. based oil route. So what it did was the original plans was that it was supposed to run close to like Bismarck, right, North Dakota, and that was like a majority like white community, and right, the area where it was supposed to run, there were basically two areas where they could run it through, and actually the most efficient way was to run it through like basically where a lot of white folks are habitating. But they actually chose to run it through an Indian reservation instead, and then that's what caused all the protests.
Right, and that's why there's so many high-paying jobs in North and South Dakota, because they can't find enough people to actually do the work. So you can get $100,000 just driving trucks and whatnot around for logistics. The issue here is that the United States really doesn't need that oil. They just wanted to just cause disruption in terms of Canadian China relations.
Mm-hmm.
But China was using that as an alternative in case Iran, in case the oil that they were getting from Iran would actually either be disrupted by geopolitical violence, upheaval, or just sanctions from the United States in general, from the JCPOA. So the oil coming in from the Canadian sands would have been a great alternative. It would have took a little longer, a few days to get there, but it would still been a cheaper alternative because there was plenty of oil to begin with.
We're sitting on a massive surplus here.
Say that again, US.
I said we're sitting on a surplus over here.
You mean the Canadians sitting on the surplus?
Yeah,
so it's a certain type of oil.
North American. Right.
Yeah, it's a certain type of oil that they're looking for, and the Canadians seem to be holding on to a lot of deposits through fracking and other means of pulling it out of the sands. The United States doesn't have the same. It's kind of a lighter crude up north than it is.
Right. Yeah. Now, I was going to say too, is you would think that was probably also a protective measure considering the petro-yuan. Now, just consider the notion that one, China decides to utilize Canada and its vast reserves, right, as a source on the North American continent, as a source for energy. Two, they would then also commodify it in a petro-yuan currency. Like, I think that would explain why the United States, even with the blowback and the opposition to that pipeline running from Canada down into the U.S. through the Dakotas, I don't think they gave a shit. They didn't care if there were going to be protesting natives and all that. They didn't care. It was like, look, at the end of the day, if we allow China to have that and price it in yuan, we're screwed.
Well,
so part of me sees it that way.
Well, actually, guess who's invested into it?
Guess who's invested in
Trump?
Oh yeah,
Trump has major investment inside the Dakota Access Pipeline.
That came up when he was running against Hillary, and they buried it. But that's true. I forgot about that.
That plays into his China card that they're raping us, and we have to do something about it. That comes into play.
Sure the hell does. Did you know that, Lionel?
I did not.
Yeah, he's invested in that pipeline, man.
So since he's investing in a pipeline, he stands to make more money with what he's doing.
Legally, he's not supposed to be making any money off of this stuff at all because he's the president.
What's that clause called, Mike? The when you become president, right? What's that clause called? When you become president, right? Like you can't also then have like businesses that are making money through the government if you're also president.
I think it's just called conflict of interest, but he transferred it to his son.
Yeah.
Which is legal, but still frowned upon.
Exactly.
Well, he still makes a profit, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if it goes to his son. He's still earning the profit.
Yeah. It'll technically be his profit when he leaves office.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, it's not his profit right now. Right. He relinquished all control. He relinquished control of it to his son. So technically,
yeah. But he can still tell his son, do this, do that.
That was the argument. That was the argument back when he was running for president.
And when he get out of office, his son will just simply transfer it back to him. Like I said,
all those gains.
Right. It's legal, but frowned upon.
Now, I'm not entirely sure about this, but from what I understand is that those pipelines have been leaking a lot. Now, we don't know if it's due to incompetence in engineering or just sabotage by some of the protesters.
I heard it was literally equipment failure. Like literally, it was just the pipes were just slapped together. And, you know, most pipes, they spring leaks anyway. You know, they spring leaks. And it was predicted that this would. And I think it's to this point, I think it's sprung there's been 3 different leaks.
That's a long
and one of them was in a water source.
What did you say, Lionel?
Well, I'm saying these are long pipes, so they're gonna be leaks. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. Like when they sell the notion of like pipelines and all this kind of stuff, and then you hear the environmentalists say, okay, well, you know, what about the impact on the environment? And they go, oh, well, you know, it's the engineering and this, and we build safe pipelines and blah, bullshit, dude. You're connecting like 3,000 miles of pipe. A leak is going to spring somewhere.
Well, that's interesting because the Russians are building that South Stream pipeline from Russia all the way into Turkey, and they don't seem to have that problem.
Interesting.
That is.
And they also have a long pipeline going from Russia all the way deep into China, the $400 billion deal that they signed a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, I'll say this, you know, we're not really factoring in the engineering part of the equation, you know, because it seems like oftentimes a lot of these types of projects are largely distributed to private contractors, right, in the United States. And, you know, it's different working with private contractors versus, you know, maybe like a civil engineering firm, right, that does things based on like civil engineering code, you know, as well as a few other sets of statutes versus, you know, contractors. They just basically do what the client requires and what they've been permitted to do. And they don't really take much else into consideration. They say, okay, well, for spring leaks, we got insurance for that. So they just build and they get it done as quickly as possible.
At the cheapest they could.
Right.
This is pretty interesting.
Notice that the cost of oil per barrel has I think has gone up.
It has gone up. But what's funny is that there's still a surplus. That's the funny part about it. The price of gas and the price of oil is going up, but the demand's not.
Any other comments on this?
No.
All right. Now this next piece is from NPR.org. Trump calls for a Space Force to defend U.S. interests among the stars. Oh my God. Okay. This is from June 18th. Let's see. Updated at 6. Okay. President Trump Monday announced his intention to create a space force that will oversee the military activities off-world. When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. Trump said at a meeting of the National Space Council, which oversees the nation's space policy. We must have American dominance in space. So important. I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish the Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed force. Really? That's a big statement, the president continued. I know, right? Experts were quickly to point out that President Trump cannot actually create a space force. A new branch of the military can only be established by an act of Congress, something that hasn't happened since the Air Force was split from the Army in 1947. Most people don't even know that one. All right, last year, the House passed a bill that would have created a Space Corps, said Todd Harrison, director of the Aerospace Security Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, but the plan died in the Senate. Harrison adds that a Space Force would not involve actual military personnel in space. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty states that no nation can claim territory in space, nixing the usual rationale for a troop presence. It also prevents the placement of nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction in orbit. There's no space marines. There's no people flying around with jetpacks, Harrison says. Rather, a space force would consolidate command of the military's existing satellite systems into a single command. Those include reconnaissance satellites, GPS, missile warning systems, and communications platforms. The U.S. military and intelligence agencies are increasingly concerned about the vulnerability of space-based systems. Both China and Russia have conducted tests of anti-satellite weapons that potentially knock military satellites from orbit. Harrison adds that ground-based lasers can blind reconnaissance satellites, and spoofing signals can confuse GPS. The Air Force, which currently oversees many of America's space systems, is already well aware of the threat. We expect space to be a contested domain, Air Force Secretary Heather Wilson said in a Senate hearing last June. We need to anticipate that any future conflict will involve conflict in space. The Air Force also wants to keep hold of its role in space warfare, says Harrison. The biggest opponent for creating any kind of space force has been the Air Force, he says, but he adds that the president's comments may end the debate inside the Pentagon. Now that the president has given this order to the military, that this is what he wants to do, they're not going to be able to oppose it. Monday evening, Pentagon Chief Spokesperson Dana W. White released a statement saying the policy board will move forward with the president's directive. Our policy board will begin working on this issue, which has implications for intelligence operations for the Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy. What? Let me read that again. Our policy board will begin working on this issue, which has implications for intelligence operations for the Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy. Working with Congress, this will be a deliberate process with a great deal of input from multiple stakeholders. Stakeholders.
Yep.
Oh yeah. So Mike, have at it, man. Have at it.
Well, first, you remember I've been talking about Black people need to get into aerospace research as well as interspace development. That whole entire market is going to be a huge explosion in the next few years, and that will put Black people to work almost overnight. Number two, this is what we call Star Wars. So now you're going to have, literal TIE fighters and, outside of the Earth's atmosphere, just battling it out.
Wait. Little TIE fighters. What do you mean by that?
You would have drones. So the United States has drones. Russia has a few drones that float around. These are areas of contention because there's hundreds of satellites above the Earth that belong to multiple nation states, as well as the United States in particular, that Putin said in the speech that they've mapped out all the United States satellites around the world and that they can take down each one of those satellites through cyber warfare or, interspace warfare.
The domain, the new domain, right, to be conquered is space. It's not terrestrial. I mean, terrestrial is pretty much, it has a set of national as well as international statutes, right, with regards to acquisition of it, how to dispute it, and all that type of stuff. Space is a completely different realm. I would even posit to say that I don't really even know, like, to the degree of which the approach to controlling space, it's actually kind of outside of the realm when I think about it, because who actually knows what type of technology is actually sitting like over in like Raytheon's labs or General Dynamics or McDonnell Douglas or Boeing or any of these Northrop Grumman or any of these defense contractors, right? We don't know what kind of technology they actually have, like just waiting in the wings. So this is a bold move to go there and just be like, look, we want space dominance. That means like you got some tech that you're about to roll out.
The actual drone that they use is called the X-37 fighter. If you look it up right now.
Okay. I've heard of that one. Heard of it.
Hold on, wait, on a momento. X-30. I know I'm not sure. X-37.
Yes, Boeing X-37.
Yeah, it's gonna be pilotless combat. The pilots are gonna be like in control rooms.
Well, that's why you had China and Russia working on going to the moon in the next 10 to 15 years. I think by 2030, that is supposed to be the go date for their to start building their moon base.
Mm-hmm.
Is this it?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? It's the one in the picture. Okay. Now, when it said domain of space, I'm thinking it's the domain that is relative, is close to the Earth's atmosphere.
Anything within I think it's 35 miles above the Earth's atmosphere is considered to be governed space.
Now, remember last week how we talked about China building islands in the South China Sea. Will that then change and say, well, you have deep orbit satellites? Will they say, well, we have this satellite that stays in its orbit, then that's our territory around this satellite?
No, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
No, because it's ungoverned space, right? So you have satellites that have positions, but they don't. It's not like you can draw a territory around it. You can't draw a territory around it, which is what the problem is, right? So
Go
ahead.
Go, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that it's not uncommon for a satellite to either fall out of space, either due to faulty hardware or malicious attempts by a threat actor, but you can't really govern that space. So that's part of the reason why the Mars mission is so important to the United States, because they need to colonize it in order to claim it for themselves.
Right. It's that So basically, if you colonize it first, then then you can then establish your terrestrial statutes with regards to how law is to be applied. Now, when looking at space, let's just look at the definition of it, right? There's two definitions that, or actually, well, two or three that stick out. The one that does stick out, space, a continuous area or expanse that is free, available, or unoccupied. Okay, that's the first thing. The dimensions of height, depth, and width within which all things exist and move. And then, to add a verb-based definition to it, position of two or more items at a distance from one another. Okay, so what space doesn't do, it doesn't give you any confines. So to speak to what Mike was saying, how do you determine who owns space? The only way you actually do that is to dominate it. You can't actually mark out anything because it's a continuous area that's free, available, or unoccupied.
And I don't think we have neither the people nor the resources to do that.
It's expensive. That's what the article is saying. It's really expensive, which is why we had this debate I think a few weeks ago about whether or not the United States went to the moon.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Now, in favor of what you said, I saw a documentary a long time ago that said the technology that was used to go to the moon is lost. They don't know what happened to it. And the technology,
my dog ate my homework.
Right. And the technology, and they steady say the power, our phones are more powerful than the systems they use. So it's like, okay, so you lost the technology, but if I want to go to space, I can just use my iPhone 8 Plus to go to space because it's much powerful than the systems you use back.
Mike, you want to tackle that one?
It has the process. It has 1,000 times the processing power of the chips back then. Those chips will only only have like 1 or 2 instructions to it. An NVIDIA chip, for example, that has artificial intelligence has 1 trillion can process 1 trillion instructions per second or something to that effect. How is it that you lost that technology that was very archaic to begin with, that probably more than likely never existed, because processing power back then was very analog. It wasn't like it wasn't like you had Pentium processors back then. You didn't have any processors because the emergence of computers in that sense didn't come until the late 70s.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, like, how do you lose that? How do you lose that? How do you lose that shit? Do you realize what it is that the government has been able to hold on to? We're talking like handwritten documents from prior presidents, past presidents, but NASA loses like flight data. BS, dude.
Well, we know that the Russians have been able to put modules on Venus.
Mm-hmm.
They were the first ones to actually get their satellites to Mars long before the United States even got there.
Okay, so do you believe in the Stanley Kubrick design, the space set type of thing?
I didn't understand what you said. You broke up.
I said, do you believe in the rumor that Stanley Kubrick filmed the space landing in a studio in LA type of deal?
Well, Hollywood has been known to do a lot of things. I mean, look at some of these masks that have been used to rob banks that look like black men, but it's really a white man wearing it. I mean, they have these capabilities to fake the human eye. I'm just saying, I don't care about that portion, but what I'm saying is the technology that never existed. It was impossible, right? I mean, the Russians it took the Russians over 12 times to get to Venus.
Yeah, I saw that video.
Right? It took them 12 times to get to Venus. So how is it that we don't have any evidence to prove that there's a flag on the on the moon? But I don't want to go back into that debate. But to answer Damiette's question, and he asked about to talk more about the moon, that moon mission. So the Russians and the Chinese have gotten together to plan out building a base on the moon. Now, some of the stuff I've been reading about South Africa and as well as Ethiopia and Egypt have been talking about space research as well, and putting together a mission of going to the moon. I think something like 2050, 2060 or something to that effect. So if you think about the projection of time, if the Chinese and the Russians are saying by 2030, and the Africans are in the European Space Agency is saying something about 2035, 2045, 2050, what does that tell you?
With this modern technology, it's taking them this long, but in 67? It took them a couple of years with archaic technology. Something don't add up.
I don't buy it, brother. I just don't buy it.
Now let me ask you this: does landing a rover on a planet determine determine that that planet is yours, or does landing an actual human being on a planet, let's say Mars, American lands a rover, well, we have rovers there already, does that determine that we have dominance over Mars or any portion of Mars, or does it have to be a human being that land on Mars to determine that?
It's whoever plants the flag.
Whoever plants the flag owns the planet, or just that portion of the planet.
They conquer, right? The term would be conquer, right? So if you look at the North Pole and you look at the South Pole, you'll notice that the Russians put their flag underwater.
Underwater?
Right, it's underwater. It's an iron flag.
Why did they put their flag underwater?
Well, where else are you going to put it?
You talking about Antarctica or the Arctic?
In the Arctic.
Oh, in the Arctic. I thought you were talking about Antarctica. Okay. In the Arctic. Okay. So whoever plants their flag on Mars first, is that planet theirs or a portion of the planet?
The planet can only be yours if you can defend it.
Which means
it's not guaranteed to be yours.
Yeah, that I know. I'm just saying from the beginning, would they say, okay, Russia planted their and I got two things to say about that. Now that I said that, Russia planted their flag on Mars first, so Mars is theirs until they can't defend it anymore. And I don't know if you all saw or have been seeing the Netflix show Expanse. Well, they have three groups of humans. They have the Earthlings, Martians, and the Belchers. But the Martians, they remind me of the Russians. So I don't know how I'm trying to tie this into this, but I understand. It'll start to become space wars where you're trying to conquer some land that somebody set their flag on. Yeah, I understand.
You're literally going to have TIE fighters battling in space.
Yeah. Yep. Now think about it like this. So you go to Mars. Let's just say I get to Mars first, right? I plant my flag. Okay. Now, if you are still interested in colonizing Mars, do you care if my flag is planted there already?
No.
Okay. So guess what you're going to do? You're going to go find a place and plant a flag there.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then you know what's going to happen? You and I are going to have a talk, and we're going to try to figure out who actually controls what.
Until somebody else plant their flag.
And then there's going to be somebody else that shows up, right? So this is basically human civilization. What, I don't know, 5 or 6.0, 7, 8.0, I don't know. We'd be looking at the same the same scenario of colonization that took place on this planet when humans started spreading on about at the onset of Pangea. So, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting to kind of go through the varying scenarios. I think the most effective way, the most effective or efficient way, is you go as a united consortium. Because look, you can go there individually. Who knows who you might run into when you get there? Next thing you know, it's like, okay, the same MFs who fight each other on Earth, they go and colonize Mars. They got beef over there, right? But the next thing you know, you got some like 12 or 13-foot aliens and their whole thing and their whole technology taking both of you out. So I don't know. You know, these are just scenarios to think about.
Well, if you look at some of the recent news about the Mars mission, you'll see that they found bacteria as well as water under the surface, or specks of water under the surface, what's considered to be riverbeds recently. So organisms up there, that there was actually something there at least 1 million years ago, right? That's what they're estimating, is about 1 million years ago. And this is why I keep going back to Black people need to get into we need to have like a multinational space agency that allow us to start getting involved in a lot of this stuff, because this is where it's going. You know, forget about IT, forget about routers and switches and networks and iPhones and stuff like that. This is where, yeah, this is what's going to create 100,000 jobs for African Americans right away, or Black people in America right away.
You know, and it's funny that you mentioned that too, because I mean, look, space has a healthy private sector. If you guys think that SpaceX is like NASA, like it's like a government-funded entity, no, it's not. It's a private company.
Elon Musk.
Oh.
Now, I don't know why I'm bringing this up. You said 12-foot aliens. I don't know why I'm supposed to say this, but science say that if there is any life form out there in this solar system, that more than likely it's going to look humanoid, because I think this is a theory. Yeah, it's a theory because it's not proven true, because this solar system can only support humanoid, well, intelligent life, humanoid form. So I'm just
well. Remember, we saw the video a few weeks ago about Boston Dynamics creating that upright robot and that dog that can go up and down, and it could jump over logs and things of that nature. I mean, there's nothing saying that you couldn't put one of those on Mars. There's nothing saying you couldn't put it on another planet or something like the moon.
That would be the ideal
to go do the work for you.
Yeah, that would be the ideal situation. Let's go do the work for her. Yeah.
Right.
Well, quite frankly, it would be, because you know, we've been experimenting for quite some time with testing the human limits of being able to sustain a journey, right, for that long to get to a place like that. And you know, there's you know, the distinction has been made that yes, humans can make the journey, right? We have the capability to do so. How effective will you be in carrying out a mission once you get there, after you've gone through this very you know, this very, like, you know, difficult journey just to get there, right? So even determining that yes, humans can physically sustain the journey to Mars, you know, how efficient is it? It might just be better off just to send robots.
I know in that Netflix show, The Expanse, they colonized only Mars. Like the Belters, they were the ones that was on the belt system, harvesting the asteroids. But there were also people on some of these planets in the I took astronomy class, I can't remember this, the larger planets, the what's the name of them, I can't think, but the larger planets, they have planets somewhat the size of Mars, and they colonized them and so forth. So it was colonizing the whole solar system. Jovial.
I'm gonna check that out. So Expanse, it's called Expanse.
Yeah, The Expanse. The outer planets past the belt are Jovian planets.
Okay.
What season? What season is it in?
I think it's the third season.
Okay,
It's
Okay.
pretty
I have
interesting.
to-
It's very interesting. Like Mars and Earth are into it. You know, Mars, Earth, because it's three different human species mainly. You got the Earthlings, you got the Martians, and you got the Belters. So they all into it with each other. But then it's new. Somebody from Earth designed this new or found they found an organism and they were injecting it into humans, and this new life form came about that can be in space without a spacesuit or anything, and they started attacking, and it started attacking everybody. So
Interesting.
Yeah, don't spoil, Lino.
Yeah.
oh yeah, well I didn't it's good. It's yeah, you know what, I did kind of spoil a little bit, but I didn't see season 3 yet. That's why I just left off.
No, you good. I'll check it out though, definitely.
Yeah, but it's pretty good. But the concept behind it, one planet, Ganymede, I think that's a planet of
Ganymede.
yeah, Ganymede is a planet of one of the Jovian planets, either Saturn or what's the other big large planet? Saturn or
Neptune,
no, Jupiter. It's,
Jupiter.
yeah, like pregnant women go there because it provides them a better birth rate, like the
Atmospheric.
yeah, the due to the atmosphere and everything, you have a better chance of your baby surviving birth. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Because we can go through that alone.
Yeah, we need to
no,
spend this one hangout just doing
doing space.
space.
Man, you know what? Hey, we can get that done. Okay.
Because we started going there when we talked about hemp applications and how it could even be applied to like space. So absolutely, man. We'll have to circle back around to that one. Yeah, we'll have to build on that one.
Oh man. Whew, I love it. Okay. This is from Al Jazeera, Syria. This is from yesterday, I think. Yeah, Syria, Constitution. Turkey, Russia, and Iran start Geneva talks. Turkey, Russia, and Iran start. Okay. Okay. Representatives from 3 nations meet in Geneva to discuss committee tasks with drafting Syria's new constitution. Okay. Geneva, Switzerland. Representatives from Russia, Iran, and Turkey are meeting in Geneva on Tuesday to discuss the establishing a committee tasked with drafting Syria's new constitution. Members of the Syrian opposition have also arrived in the Swiss city, where officials of the 3 nations acting as guarantors of a ceasefire in the war-torn country are meeting under the auspices of the United Nations. I don't expect, let's be frank, a major breakthrough, but I am confident progress is possible, said UN envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, in a statement to the press in advance of the meetings. There is something moving in that direction, and we need to capitalize on it. The meeting in Geneva follows up on the agreement signed at the Syrian National Dialogue Congress in Sochi in January, whose final statement called for the creation of a constitutional commission comprising government, opposition, and Syrian civil society members. The creation of the Constitutional Committee will be the first step in the political solution of the conflict as mandated by the Security Council Resolution 2254. Besides government and opposition, it will be important that independents, civil society, experts, and women, as you know, we have been strongly recommending at least 30% of women all find their place in the Constitutional Committee. We must have an inclusive process, said de Mistura. I want to discuss with Iran, Russia, and Turkey some preliminary thinking and hear their own views too on how the Sochi final statement can be given effect to. De Mistura said the government of Syria It already conveyed to him a list of 50 names. De Mistura said serious efforts were underway to draw the opposition list. The UN envoy called for the Geneva meeting after concluding a round of consultations that brought him to Turkey, Iran, and Egypt to discuss how to speed up the process for the creation of a constitutional committee. Baskets of reform. Alexander Lavrentiev, okay, am I saying this right, Mike? Alexander Lavrentiev, presidential envoy of Syria, and Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Vershinin are attending the meetings for Russia. Sedat Onal, the Deputy Undersecretary for Foreign Affairs of Turkey, and Hossein Jabari Ansari, Senator Assistant to Iran's Foreign Minister, also are attending the meeting. The UN-led peace process based in Geneva has laid out the so-called 4 baskets of reform for a political settlement of the crisis. They include the drafting of a new constitution, parliamentary discussion, oh God, parliamentary elections, the creation of a non-sectarian transitional government, and the fight against the Damascus cause terrorism. But the talks have made little progress as far as government and opposition have failed to find any agreement over the fate of President Bashar al-Assad. Since the beginning of the Syrian uprising, more than 465,000 Syrians have been killed and over 12 million, half the country's pre-war population, have been displaced. All right, this is from Al Jazeera News. So what does this constitution that Syria, Turkey, and Russia, if they do form this constitution, what are the benefits of that to each country and to that region?
It's really to get the United States out, for one, and number two, the Kurdish peoples of Syria wants to. What they're trying to do, what the United States is trying to do, is carve out a state within Syria for the Kurdish people. The problem is the Constitution of Syria doesn't allow for a new state to be created within the country itself. In regards and in context to the Kurdish People's Republic, it's just not going to happen. It'll be like the United States trying to have California leave the Union. That's just, you see that every year, every presidential cycle. Somebody's always talking about Texas or California is going to leave the Union and succeed and all that sort of stuff. Not going to happen, right? But in Syria, they, the Europeans and as well as the other Gulf Coast Council members seem to think that they can break up Syria legally and still have it recognized. It's just not going to happen because you still have another portion of the Middle East that's not going to recognize it. You also have Armenians living inside Syria too, but you don't see them trying to carve out a piece of Syria to themselves.
I don't really have much else to add on to what Mike said because I think he summed it up perfectly. I would say the only other thing that, just listening to you sort of read the context of that is really to bolster this new bloc because, Turkey has long been on the fence, right? It could have kind of teetered either way, could have gone with China, Russia, BRICS, or could go with NATO, right? But in this regard, you're starting to see where the alliances are being strengthened, and it is just what Mike said. It's basically if they strengthen all of themselves together and they can get on the books in the open that they're all in unity on some degree or another, then essentially what happens is that that's an alliance signal to the United States and to any sort of NATO partners with regards to what this bloc is forming and how the relationships are going to be. Trust and believe there are some defense agreements or some sort of defense pacts, security pacts, protection pacts. I'm almost certain that's in the agreements.
Well, keep in mind too that because the Kurds have been working with the United States, they're basically backstabbing the Syrian government, and they would be considered traitors by law, traitors and terrorists. Which would make them viable for treason in high court.
Treason. Yep.
So okay, I'm reading and I'm trying to look at the map. So they inhabit parts of Turkey, northwestern Iran, northern Iraq. So Turkey, northwestern Iran, northern Iraq. What is it?
Right, it's going to be in that little. You see that area right there where you're going to go. Yeah. What's that? Erbil, Tabriz, right? And then over to shoot, I can't. Yeah. So in that area it's like that little area where those three countries meet: Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. In that area right there.
In northern Syria, because we did talk about in this patch of green area, right? They're there. So
right, that's what I'm saying. That Turkey, whole area in the north, right there. Yeah. Yep.
So they're
that's why the Kurds are largely used as sort of like a strategic. They're like a strategic population because they're present in literally like 4 countries, right? So they can be easily co-opted by other governments, throw them some money.
Turkish.
Well, they've been largely financed by the United States government by the millions.
That's what I'm saying. So I was like, yeah.
So they have all of U.S. military's training as well as the financing to back them. The only problem is who's going to recognize them. So when they go to the United Nations to be to speak out against Syria, they're not going to get the recognition that they need because the only real ally that they have in the Middle East is Israel, and nobody's going to side with Israel on this at all.
Well, look, you've heard talks about the establishment of a Kurdish state, right? But where is that? Where exactly?
Well, so they have Kurdistan in Iraq, and that has been fully functional, but it's not a actual country within itself.
That's what I'm saying. It's a nation state. It's a nation state within Iraq. It's not its own autonomous country. And I think like that's what Kurds have largely been pushing and fighting for is the establishment. It's kind of like a pseudo Israel to some degree or to some extent, But when you look again, when you pull back the map and you look at where Kurds strategically are positioned, right? They occupy 4 countries.
Right.
Are there any in Armenia?
There are some that have run to Armenia, but Armenia is a Christian country, and they actually don't recognize the Kurds in that regard, right? So it's not like, oh well, they occupy Armenia and they want recognition from the Armenian government. No, they want recognition from the Syrian and the Turkish and the Iraqi.
I was about to say, they're still trying to get reparations for the damn genocide. They're like, well, screw other people. Like we're still trying to get our shit correct.
And they're largely like African Americans. There's about 40 million of them, or if not 42 million of them. And they're looking for reparations, which is something African Americans have been looking for. And the only difference is that the YPJ and the YPG would be considered something like the Black Panther Party of the United States. They're recognized by the federal government as a terrorist organization, just like Turkey recognizes the YPG and the YPJ as a terrorist organization. There's just a lot of similarities there. And Black people, you always hear Black people talk about overthrowing the white man and also, Hotep's bullshit. But in America, they're always talking about trying to carve out their own little state, and that's not going to happen. Who's going to recognize you?
Mm-mm. Well, only thing you could do is you can establish a business infrastructure within the pre-existing corporate infrastructure. Like to me, that's like your best move and your easiest move.
You'd be better off colonizing Mars.
Damn. Damn. Shit.
Go ahead, Lino.
I can't follow that up, man.
Look, the idea of overthrowing a government, like when you hear people talk, dude, that is, look, you know, regardless of what the current government administration is doing, right? The government it's of the people, by the people, for the people. Okay, so it is comprised of the people that make it up, right? See, so largely you can change government by changing the people who are participating in it, right? And then the government, that government structure as it is, will reflect the wills and values of those people, right? That's how you change government. You don't overthrow the shit. That's not what you do. Like, you know, just as much as the, you know, these large moneyed corporate interests, whether it be financial services, whether it be military industrial, whether it be, you know, logistics and retail, whatever the hell it is, what do? They are actively involved in politics.
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
of team killmongers out here that just say overthrow, but you're not looking at how to do it, and B, if you do it, what next?
I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, cropping out your face and putting on a comic book character and calling yourself the realest guy alive. I mean, that doesn't really
pan out. It don't. You know, because to be honest, I laugh at you too. Like, oh, that's cute, huh? You know, or like people talking about I'm Killmonger's son, and somebody made the point. Okay, you got this guy, got this warlord. When he do kill all of the enemies, guess who he gonna turn his sights on to next? You.
Well, I guess my question would be, okay, you do all that. My question to you is, okay,
you ain't got no tanks. You ain't got no S-400s.
I mean, look, I guess at that point, that's where I'm just like, okay, look, now that you've got the government, what's your 200-year plan? If you don't have a 200, what's your snob plan? You know what? We're gonna go ahead and make that a hashtag. Your snob plan. All right. Hashtag snob plan. So I'll ask them, what's your snob plan? And if they don't have one, guess who's getting overthrown?
You. Nobody getting overthrown.
No, whoever just overthrew something and then didn't come in and didn't have any plans for anything to replace anything.
Oh, they're gonna get.
Guess who's gonna get overthrown?
Yeah, they're gonna get overthrown. What they overthrown is gonna come back and just take
Exactly. And you see it happen all the time in Africa, man. That's like something that's just commonplace.
I mean, you can't put Rams on a tank. That it ain't gonna happen. You can't.
You talking about Dubs,
right? You know what I mean? You can't put Rams on the Hummer. It you know, and start fighting in the tar sands of in the wetlands of Florida. No, it don't work, man.
Yeah, you can't go to war with snapbacks and silkscreen t-shirts. Let's move on, I know.
Okay. This is from RT.com. Trump repeats call to halt U.S. South Korea drills. Stores unease amongst military and allies. Yeah, okay. Where we at? Okay, military exercises put the U.S. in a bad light during talks with North Korea and are expensive, Trump said, calling again for the drills to be canceled. His plans have apparently unsettled both the Pentagon and regular allies. Holding back the war games during the negotiations was my request because they are very expensive and set a bad light during a good faith negotiation. U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted on Sunday, reaffirming his intention to suspend the annual joint U.S. South Korean military exercises. He also said the drills are quite provocative. At the same time, he pointed out that the war games will only be suspended and not scrapped entirely, giving Washington an opportunity to resume them immediately if talks on North Korea's denuclearization break down. However, he expressed hope that the talks will eventually succeed. President Trump's plan actually seemed to be in line with the roadmap initially proposed by Russia and China. The Double Freeze Initiative, which was introduced by Moscow and Beijing in September 2017, when the situation on the North Korean peninsula was significantly worse, envisioned North Korea suspending its nuclear and missile programs in exchange for the U.S. and South Korea abandoning their military exercises in the region. Pyongyang, which also repeatedly slammed the drills as a provocation, is expected to welcome the move. Trump's plans, however, are viewed much less favorably by the U.S. military and Washington allies in the Asia Pacific region, eroding combat readiness and strengthening China. The Pentagon is apparently reluctant to support the president's initiative, but is still trying to save face. Following Trump's initial announcement of his plans to suspend the drills, Chief Pentagon spokeswoman Dana White told CNN that U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis was consulted on the matter and thus was not surprised by Trump's announcement. The secretary is in full alignment with the president to meet his goal, which is denuclearization of the peninsula, she said. Later in the week, the Pentagon also released statements on Mattis's phone conversations with his South Korean and Japanese counterparts, which said the Pentagon chief reassured the U.S. allies that Washington still remains true to its ironclad defense commitments and allies with Seoul and Tokyo. The U.S. Forces Korea Command said that it has not received any updated guidance on the execution or cessation of training exercises and would continue its preparation for the drills scheduled to take place in the autumn. However, according to some media reports, Pentagon officials fear the suspension of exercises could erode the combat readiness of the U.S. military contingent in the region. Critics of the initiative also warn that it could reduce the effectiveness of an alliance between Washington and Seoul, Reuters reports. It would definitely impact readiness of both American and South Korean forces. Brian McKeon, a former senior Pentagon official, told the New York Times. These fears are also apparently shared by Seoul. The South Korean president's office said, following Trump's initial announcement, that it was still analyzing the U.S. president's words. Seoul's defense ministry also said at the time that there is a need to discern the exact meaning and intention of President Trump's commitments. A former South Korean military official, Moon Seong-mook, who now works as a senior analyst for the Seoul-based Korea Research Institute for National Strategy, told AP that the American military presence in South Korea would mean, wouldn't mean much if the militaries don't practice through joint drills. Meanwhile, the Japanese media warned about the suspected growing influence of China in the region, as it reported on Sunday that Beijing was allegedly behind the idea of suspending the U.S. drills. Chinese President Xi Jinping reportedly urged North Korean leader Kim Jong un during a meeting in early May to call on Washington to suspend military exercises with Seoul. Japanese Asahi Shimbun newspaper said, citing unnamed Chinese diplomatic sources. Kim then allegedly pursued this during his meeting with Trump, the paper said, citing North Korean state news agency KCNA. The media outlet went on to say that the U.S. South Korean joint drills have been a considerable concern for China, adding that Beijing is attempting to sway the talks between Washington and Seoul in its favor. Justified costs. Trump's complaints about the cost of the drills were apparently also not very well received by U.S. officials and the media. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, called the president's reasoning on the matter ridiculous. It's not a burden onto the American taxpayer to have a forward deployed force in South Korea. It brings stability. It's a warning to China that you can't just take over the whole region. Okay. So I reject the analysis that it costs too much, he told CNN on Wednesday, adding that the money we spend training our allies is money well spent. Trump blasted his critics in another tweet. The denuclearization deal with North Korea is being praised and celebrated all over Asia. They are so happy over here in our country. Some people would rather see this historic deal fail than give Trump a win, even if it does save potential millions and millions of lives. Total cost of the exercises, among the biggest in the world, has not yet been publicly revealed. However, CBS News calculated the flight costs for the three types of U.S. bombers that fly between the U.S. base in Guam and South Korea during the drills at $3,470,000, 330. Repeat that again, $3,470,337. Adding that it is just a fraction of the Pentagon's impressive $681.1 billion proposed budget for fiscal year 2019. That amount, however, is only a fraction of the total cost of the drills, something that CBS did not mention. In 2017, the Ochi Friedman Guardian exercise involved apparently 17,500 total U.S. service members, with approximately 3,000 coming off the peninsula, coming from off the peninsula. The Pentagon said in a statement, according to the U.S. media, more than 50,000 South Korean troops took part in the drills. Ochi Freedom Guardian is just one of the two major annual U.S.-South Korean joint drills staged near the Korean Peninsula. The second, called Foiled Eagle, is held in the spring and is also one of the world's biggest military drills. All right. Just one thing I want to say. That's expensive. And Lindsey Graham said, and I'm going to tie what he said into the tariffs and a looming recession. That's just another, yeah, that's another reason why I say it's a perfect storm is brewing. But go ahead, Mike. What you want to say about this here?
I was just going to say that the the Japanese are the losers in all of this because they still have not made amends with South Korea, North Korea, or Japan. Or China, or the Philippines, and and they have not apologized for what they've done in the past. So there's a lot of odds against the Japanese at this point. So they've been trying to link up behind the scenes with India by putting military naval ports and military bases inside India as a way to counter China in case Chinese expansion, especially some of these Belt and Road initiatives, to try to blow up the operations for that, which is why you have the SCO in the first place.
Now, it also stated that the U.S. is trying to prevent China from being an occupying force or a force period in the South China Sea. That is so. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like you.
Well, I mean, look, why do you think the Chinese think? I mean, look, if you were Chinese, wouldn't you think that that's like a laughable suggestion?
Yes,
coming from an American.
Oh, you mean they're hypocrites?
It's like, pardon me, I'm sorry, you're in the South China Sea, and you're telling me, I can't be in my own seat. I'm sorry. Please continue.
As they say, get the I can't be a force in my own seat.
Think about it.
I would push them out also. That's
what you got going on. I mean, people think this is like make this stuff. It's like you hear a lot of this, especially you're going to hear it from the media here on this side. A lot of the jingoism. We have to exert dominance to protect American interests and freedom. It's like, okay, let's take you out of yourself for a second and let's take an objective view of what you just said. So if I'm Chinese, I'm just supposed to accept your position? I'm just supposed to accept that shit? Like, oh, okay, that's what you guys are doing? Oh, okay. Oh, we didn't know that's what you guys were doing. We just thought you guys were like here trying to like exert your dominance on us.
Laughable, man. The South China, you know what? Any other points on that?
No, I mean I think that one was pretty basic. Yeah.
But Mike, you do got a point. Since since Japan hasn't made advances to all these countries, when China becomes a force in the South China Sea, and finally is successful in the Belt and Road Initiative, and all these countries are trading with each other, these countries have long memories because a lot of it has to do with culture. So they're gonna punish Japan, and Japan really don't want that because they seem not to be able to apologize and make amends. So they want to keep America there in the South China Sea. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're right. You're right in a sense. But my initial point is you have South Korea linking up with North Korea at some point. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, but within a few years. There's still nuclear weapons inside North Korea that South Korea could potentially use. That means that the whole entire peninsula of Korea has now been nuclearized. And Japan does not have any active nukes. Now, Japan does have nuclear technology and has quote unquote unassembled weapons of mass destruction, but it would take hours for them to assemble those weapons and actually deliver them to their target.
What about the mech robots though?
What do you mean mech robots?
No, I'm just joking, dude. Like no.
I know. I get it now. Well, you have to remember that Japan has a dying population, as well as a growing debt, and they're big investors into crypto because they're trying to hedge themselves. They're trying to hedge the market ahead of time. They still have a 100, 200 year plan to try to survive, and they're running low on fuel or energy, as well as food resources. That's why they're always out there illegally fishing in different waters.
Ooh, speak on that one. Ooh.
Yeah, they've been kicked out of many waters and out of the coast of Africa and other parts of the South China Sea because they're in different people's territory trying to fish because they can't grow their own food.
Yeah,
so they have to import it.
Yeah, I was gonna say what they do largely with the fishing, and the Japanese own. They basically have a lock on the tuna market because the last time I read into it, they literally have like a 150-year stockpile of tuna.
Who do?
The Japanese.
How? Wait, how do you have 100?
Because they fished that much tuna out of the water.
So, wait. How do you stockpile tuna for 150 years?
Look this up, man. Look it up. That's like that's one thing that they hold on to that they've got a lock on is the tuna markets.
So haven't they overfished the region?
Just basically what Mike was saying. You're
Okay,
fishing in other waters. You're fishing those fish out of other waters.
how do you? Okay, I think it's about freezing the fish, but how do you get the fish off the coast of Africa through these Southeast Asian islands to Japan?
What do you mean? I mean, if you're just fishing, you're basically just catching enough fish to store inside your vessel, whatever fishing vessel that you have. The problem is you don't have permission to fish in those areas anyways. So what happens is the Coast Guards or whatever security forces out there is going to drive you right out. Now, there's been backdoor deals that the Japanese has been able to bribe by dumping technology into Africa in exchange for resources such as rhinoceros horns and tusks and things like that. So, Africa is pretty corrupt in terms of doing business. But the point of the matter is that Japan is very dependent upon other nation states to survive at this point. And if China, North Korea, South Korea, and Russia all linked up together, and they're unifying the Korean Peninsula, that means curtains for the for the Japanese, because the deal that's supposed to be brokered is that the Americans have to leave South Korea at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Americans are leaving, Southeast Asia, then that leaves them wide open. So they've been expanding their military the last few years, in Africa, in talks with India to put naval ports in military bases inside India, to counter China. I mean, but the Japanese taking on China at this point, I mean, you're talking about taking on a juggernaut. This isn't like the 1930s and the 1920s where, China was weak and Japan was strong. It's the opposite now.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and to add on to that, I don't know, I'm not sure, what the news coverage is like on this stuff in, the region of the country where you guys are at. But what's going on over here, like on the West Coast and out in the Pacific, right? Because you have that Kilauea is still blowing off in Hawaii, right? And I was actually even thinking about maybe even doing like a hangout, just like a special one to talk about what's going on in Hawaii, because quiet is kept, and this is what the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, has been keeping close track of. And what's coming out is that they've been keeping track of this shit for like the last 30 years. And they knew that this type of activity that's going on with Kilauea happens literally every 2 years, like clockwork. Okay. But what they're also finding is that this activity is around what they call the Pacific Ring of Fire. Okay. So that includes Japan. Okay. So there's a lot going on, like literally out in the Pacific Ocean, with volcanic activity, geothermal plate movement, tectonic plate movement activity, all that kind of stuff. The reason why I said I wanted to do maybe like a special, like a special hangout talking about what's going on there is because, again, what's not being talked about is that what's going on Kilauea is you have all this lava that's just coming up out of the ground. And what it is that when it's called weight displacement. So you take the weight from underground, you put it up on top of the ground, and then it weighs the top of the ground down. Now, all the lava is pouring onto what's called the Helena slump. And it's a part of a tectonic plate that if there's enough weight on it, it's just going to push, dude. It's going to push down in the water. And basically they're predicting a mega tsunami. You see, so all along the Pacific region right now, man, if you look into it, there's volcanoes popping off all over the place. So Japan is in a very precarious, it's in a very precarious position. They still had the whole, Fukushima. Okay. You think that's gone away? Like, there's a lot of things about Japan that, they're not necessarily in a position to do much of anything right about now.
They're completely vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like these hangouts because, as you mentioned, they they're not surfing, fishing in different people's territory. When you mention the coast of Africa, man, again,
look up.
Say, well, buy some land in Kenya. We gotta let us fish here, and we'll sell it to the Japanese. You know, just little things like that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, look up. I think, and Mike, maybe you can kind of corroborate this, but it was a few years ago. Wasn't it like there was like the Norwegian naval the Norwegian naval service had a run-in with like a Japanese whaling vessel or something like that, fishing off of their waters, like this, and it was like a major thing. So it's like that's not like a non-known thing about the Japanese and some of the tactics they utilize in terms of fishing.
Right, and they're also known for illegally fishing whales. Whales are protected. Most whales are protected, and they're constantly going out there and fishing for these whales because I guess they have a market, even a black market for all that stuff. And you know, that's the way Japan, you know, rocks, and that's going to be their downfall because I don't know how much whale blubber you can possibly eat or feed your people with.
Right.
Well, let's continue with this thing. This is from RT.com again. No F-35s for Turkey. U.S. Senate blocks sale of fighter jets to Ankara. U.S. senators have voted to block the sale of F-35 to Turkey, slamming their NATO ally for plans to buy Russia S-400 missile batteries. Ankara warned of an alternative should the deal be called off. The first of the 100 U.S.-made F-35 fighter jets were to be delivered to Turkey on June 21, but now the whole deal might be off as the U.S. senators voted to kill the sale. The bill, which is yet to be approved by President Donald Trump, passed the Senate floor on Monday, with 85 votes in favor and 10 against. Lawmakers chose to remove Turkey from the F-35 program, citing two reasons. The first is Turkey's plans to purchase S-400 surface-to-missile batteries from Russia. The adopted bill states that such a deal is sanctionable under current United States law. The agreement to deliver two S-400 batteries was concluded between Moscow and Ankara last year, and the prospects of a key NATO ally in the region buying Russian arms immediately unnerved the U.S. politicians. The second reason is the detention of a pastor, Andrew Brunson, by Ankara. Brunson, who is a full U.S. citizen, who is a U.S. citizen, is being held on charges of espionage and assisting the plotters of an unsuccessful 2015 military coup attempt.
I was just about to say spy.
Yeah. Brunson denies all allegations, and his prosecution continues unlawfully and wrongfully, argues Senator Jeanne Shaheen, one of the authors of the bill targeting Ankara. The U.S. Senator's move was to meet with fierce criticism from Turkey Prime Minister Binali Yildirim called the bill a very unfortunate development in the relations between the two nations. This initiative goes against the spirit of strategic partnership, he said on Tuesday, adding that Turkey will have an alternative ready if the U.S. goes on to call off the F-35's deal. As the U.S. lawmakers began rallying against the sale, top Turkish officials have been warning that they will consider getting the required planes elsewhere. As for buying the Russian missile systems, the Turkish foreign minister confirmed Ankara's stance. We're getting the S-400s, and it's a done deal. Mevlut Cavusoglu said, as quoted by the Turkish media. Arms trade and the Brunson case aren't the only points of contention between the U.S. and Turkey. Ankara demands the U.S. to hand over Fethullah Gulen, a prominent dissident cleric who currently resides in Pennsylvania. Turkey considers him and his followers to be terrorists and tried to overthrow the government 2 years ago. So, I'm guessing Turkey is going to get their planes from Russia.
Well, I think this relates back to that previous story we talked about with Syrian constitution. Remember, I was just saying, I'm pretty sure there's like some security packs, defense packs within all of that. So I could totally see that being feasible.
Right, and the replacement for the F-35, the Turks want the Turks and the Russians are actually brokering a deal for the Su-57, which is equivalent to the F-35. More high tech though. Or I shouldn't say more high tech, but more reliable, because the F-35 has been a problematic piece of hardware that the Americans dumped a whole lot of money into.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. You know, one of the articles we read where we talked about was saying that Russia was going to sell some of its planes to some countries. Any other comments on that?
No, I think we're good.
All right. This one comes from Telezerve TV, Nicaragua, Venezuela.
Telesur.
Okay, TelesurTV.net. Nicaragua, Venezuela. One enemy, one fight for democracy. Okay.
Wait. Before you go on, there's an ad at the top of the page that says Crypto Summit. What is that all about? Crypto Investment Summit? I hope it's not a virus or anything like that.
Well, we'll see. Crypto Investment Summit.
Where's this at?
LA, October 22nd to 24th, 2018, LA Convention Center.
Oh, we'll let Ulysses go out there. That's his
yeah. That's his neighborhood. He can take all that traffic.
Whoa, what was that? That's in LA at the convention center? That's downtown.
Yeah. October 22nd to 24th.
CNBC crypto trader DNA. Oh. Hey, send me that. Email that to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good eye. All right. Nico, okay. Let me scroll down some more. All the signs are there, just as in Venezuela. People at the grassroots level in Nicaragua won't get fooled again, writes Tortilla Consol. What? Okay, Bolivia, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are all targets of the U.S. government because they challenge control of Latin America and the Caribbean by Western corporate elites and their local allies. By means of soft coups, these interests have, at least for now, taken power in Brazil and Argentina, hijacked the government in Ecuador, and derailed the peace process in Colombia. Currently, U.S. efforts at regime change focus most urgently on Venezuela and Nicaragua, while reverting the failed policy of punitive sanctions against Cuba and biding their time for the moment in Bolivia. Despite the relentless psychological warfare campaign to discredit them, the governments of Bolivia, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela defend their people's fundamental democratic rights to peaceful economic development focused on human needs rather than corporate profit. This is especially important to understand the case of Nicaragua. There, the government has democratized the economy to the point where the cooperative, associative, and family-based small and micro business sectors generate 70% of employment, contributing over 50% of GDP. In their different ways, these four countries, all members of the Bolivian Alliance of the Americas, ALBA, have developed viable economic models directly opposed to Western corporate monopoly financed capitalism. They are facing legal actions by the U.S. government and its allies aimed at destabilizing and, if possible, overthrowing their legitimate governments. They all promote diverse models of genuine political and economic democracy for their peoples. Theirs is a common struggle against the U.S. and European imperial elites, whose governments are desperate to break their own accelerating decline relative to China, Russia, and other majority world countries. Nicaragua and Venezuela similarities. While the endless war on Venezuela aims at controlling the country's enormous oil and mineral reserves, Nicaragua also has significant natural resources. It has Central America's most abundant water resources, well over 60% of Central America's natural ecosystems, and also around 7 to 10% of the world's biodiversity. Wow, I did not know that. The geostrategic position of Nicaragua and Venezuela enables their governments to project into the Caribbean and their respective neighboring countries the political and economic vision of a multipolar world based on solidarity and cooperation rather than subjugation and pillage, now rampant in Brazil, Argentina, and elsewhere. The minority opposition, led by the private business, media, and NGO sectors in both Venezuela and Nicaragua, have consistently failed electorally and politically, restoring to insurrectional violence aimed at regime change rejected by the country's majorities. The political opposition is deeply divided in both countries and capable of offering the electorate a viable, inclusive program of sustainable national human development that meets everyone's needs in every sphere of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural life. The governments of both countries have repeatedly demonstrated their institutional legitimacy in serial elections. Both countries are surrounded by U.S. and allied military bases. Both countries are committed to regional integration initiatives. Venezuela and UNASUR, Nicaragua in the Central American Integration System, or SICA, while both are strong supporters of CELAC. In the United Nations and other international forums, Venezuela and Nicaragua defend international law, condemning the criminal actions of the United States and its allies against, for example, Palestine, Syria, and Iran. Hmm. Both governments insist on dialogue and mutual respect to resolve both domestic national conflicts and regional and global international conflicts. De facto Popular Front. Differences between the two countries result directly from their different geography and economic structure. Venezuela was able to decide to leave the Organization of American States because its status as a supplier of oil and mineral resources gives sufficient autonomy. Nicaragua, more dependent on agricultural and commercial trade with regional partners, has chosen not to abandon the OAS. The decision may well be partly in order to maintain the number of OAS member countries resisting pressure to legitimize the illegal U.S. war on Venezuela. But Nicaragua's government also thinks maintaining dialogue with this North American dominated forum will help disarm potentially strongly aggressive measures from the U.S. government against Nicaragua's vulnerable economy. That is also probably why Nicaragua remains a faithful ally of Taiwan, while U.S. client states such as Costa Rica and Panama have abandoned Taiwan in favor of the People's Republic of China, a key investment and trading ally of Venezuela. However, its loyalty to Taiwan has not prevented Nicaragua from working with China to develop the proposal for a new interoceanic canal to complement the Panama Canal by expanding shipping capacity across the Central American Isthmus. Nicaragua also maintains excellent commercial and development cooperation relations with South Korea and Japan, as well as various Arab nations, as well as Iran. Venezuela and Nicaragua share this eclectic approach to international relations. Both have very important trade and investment relations with Russia and are developing relations with India. In effect, the Alba countries from a modern day popular front Regionally, the rest of the determination, the resist of the determination of the region's fascist corporate elites to seize or keep power and subordinate their countries' economies to North American and European corporate interests. Globally, they defend the vision of a multipolar world based on solidarity and international law against repeated criminal imperialists, economic and military aggression from the United States and its allies. Nicaragua is under attack now because it is a vital component of the regional Popular Front, both for strong political and economic reasons, and two, for deep historical and cultural reasons. Current national developments. After the five After 5 years of unprecedented siege, Venezuela's president Nicolas Maduro has again defeated the U.S. government and its allies, decisively winning the May 20 elections. Now the war on Venezuela will intensify even more economically, diplomatically, and militarily. Similarly, U.S. government efforts to overthrow Nicaragua's elected government will also fail. In what amounts to a war on attrition, President Ortega and his government team are systematically dismantling the illegitimate pretensions of the minority opposition's makeshift coalition. Despite cynical manipulation by the mediating Episcopal Conference trying to gerrymander the national dialogue for peace in the opposition's favor. Just as in Venezuela, public opinion in Nicaragua is strongly against the violent tactics of extortion and intimidation by the minority opposition. Even OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro has denounced the lies of the opposition representatives in Nicaragua. The Inter American Commission for Human Rights has acknowledged that the deaths and injuries mentioned in this preliminary report have yet to be investigated. As the facts come out, a truer picture will emerge, confirming that most of the deaths and injuries have been of government supporters and bystanders caught up in the violence. For example, testimony from one of the protesters unable to square events with his conscious allergies that the two students killed on April 20th in Estella were shot by paid opposition thugs. Similar testimonies will confirm that the violence in Nicaragua was deliberately instigated by the opposition, exploiting genuine protest to discredit the government unjustly, just as in Venezuela. This weekend, Campesino leader Commandant Jorge Diaz, president of a demobilized ex-combatants association, withdrew from the opposition side of the national dialogue, urging his rank and file to dismantle their roadblocks, a phenomenon that has paralyzed the country for weeks. He denounced manipulation of his rural worker membership by some of the bishops and the opposition. That move recalls the clear-sighted remarks of assassinated former Nicaraguan Contra leader Commandant Franklin to a Sandinista leader after the 1990 elections. The oligarchy used you to overthrow Somoza. Now they have used us to overthrow you. All the signs are there, just as in Venezuela. People at the grassroots level in Nicaragua won't get fooled again. All right, that was a long piece. You got to break it down for us, Mike.
Well, this goes back to what we were discussing maybe a week or so ago about Colombia joining NATO. So now you see the purpose of NATO being in that region, because now there's so much volatility and hostility that that is happening within the region, because the United States is starting to put pressure and the other states are starting to move in a different direction. Now, what happens behind the scenes is that Cuba is really driving a lot of this foreign policy that you see happening in Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Bolivia. They're all going back to Havana, because a lot of the discussions that were happening before was that the United States tried to isolate Cuba for all these years, but the rest of the Latin American states were basically saying, well, if Cuba can't come, you can't come either. And that put the United States into an isolationist position where they didn't have a seat at the table anymore. Now Cuba has to come. Cuba is at the table, and United States is out. So now there's a resurgence of the United States coming to reclaim what's happening in Latin America because they spent so much time in the Middle East getting bogged down.
Mm.
I got nothing for that.
Are you sure?
Shit. I mean, Mike summed it up succinctly.
All right. Now this next one is for you, Ulysses. So we're gonna let you go. This thing is act right. Okay, we're gonna let you have your say in this next one. All right, this is from LATimes.com. Radical plans to split California into 3 states. Earns spot on November ballots. All right. California's 168-year run as a single entity, hugging the continent's edge for hundreds of miles and sprawling east across mountains and desert, could come to an end next year. As a controversial plan to split the Golden State into 3 new jurisdictions qualified Tuesday for the November 6th ballot. If a majority of voters who cast ballots agree, a long and contentious process will begin for 3 separate states to take the place of California, with one primarily centered around Los Angeles and the other 2 divvying up the counties to the north and south. Completion of the radical plan is far from certain, given its many hurdles at judicial, state, and federal levels, will make history. It will be the first division of an existing U.S. state since the creation of Western Virginia in 1863. 3 states will get us better infrastructure, better education, and lower taxes. Tim Draper, the Silicon Valley venture capitalist who sponsored the ballot measure, said in an email to the Times last summer when he formally submitted the proposal. States will be more accountable to us and can cooperate and compete for citizens.
Yeah, sure, buddy.
The initiative's introductory passage, Draper argues that vast parts of California are poorly served by a representative government dominated by a large number of elected representatives from a small part of our state, both geographically and economically.
The irony in that statement. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The proposal aims to invoke Article 4, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the provision guiding how an existing state can be divided into new states. Draper's plan calls for 3 new entities, Northern California, and Southern California, which would roughly divide the population of the existing state into thirds. Northern California would consist of 40 counties stretching from Oregon south to Santa Cruz County, then east to Merced and Mariposa counties. Southern California will begin with Madera County in the Central Valley and then wind its way along the existing state's eastern and southern spine, comprising 12 counties and ultimately curving up the Pacific coast to grab San Diego and Orange counties. Under the long shot proposal, Los Angeles County would anchor the 6 counties that retain the name California, a state that would extend northward along the coast to Monterey County. Draper's campaign website argues the 3 states will have reasonably similar household incomes and enough industry to produce their own viable economies. It was that issue, economic sustainability, that helped fail 2 of Draper's previous efforts in 2012-2014 to create 6 California states. Critics said some of the more rural regions would suffer from extraordinary rates of poverty as individual states while coastal communities would flourish in new, smaller states where the lion's share of California's tax revenue is generated.
I was just about to go there, but go ahead.
Ultimately, though, it was a fumble by Draper's political team that doomed the six-state effort. The campaign collected hundreds of thousands of signatures in 2014 in an initiative, only to see too many of them invalidated by elections officials. Last September, Draper submitted the modified version that he calls Cal 3. On Tuesday, elections officials said a sample of the signatures project, more than 402,468 of them, are valid, more than enough to be included on a November ballot that could see as many as 16 propositions by the deadline for certification later this month. The cost of Draper's 2018 effort is still unclear. While he spent almost 4.9 million of his own money on the unsuccessful signature drive in 2014, state records through last December report only about 559,000. That was before
let's not let's not overlook that point. By the way, keep going.
Okay. That was before petition circulation intensified this past spring. Vendors were told in March they would be paid $3 per signature, higher than many of the other proposals found on card tables set up outside stores and other public areas. That's interesting.
Wait. Did they say they were paying for signatures?
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay. Okay. I'll leave off it. What did I leave off? Okay. What? I forgot where I left off at.
It had something to do with like paid.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. The history of California admitted to the Union on September 9, 1850 has been marked by more than 200 attempts to either reconfigure its boundaries, split it into pieces, or even have the state succeed and become an independent country. The last three-state proposal, crafted by a Butte County legislator, failed in the state capital in 1993. A publicized effort by activists to have California secede from the United States, branded the Cal Exit proposal,
Mm-hmm.
to be band-aid about for the ballot in 2020. Nothing about Draper's historic demarcation of democracy will be easy. Were voters to approve his ballot measure, the effort would need the blessing of both houses of the California legislative, lawmakers who, in a sense, will be asked to abandon their posts. Draper's proposal says the initiative, acting under California's constitutional power of voters to write their own laws, will serve as legislative consent. It is almost certain that interpretation will end up in courts. For there, the plan would need congressional approval. Here, too, politics would presumably play a major role. Where California now has 2 seats in the 100-person U.S. Senate, the three-state will have 6 seats in a 104-member chamber. That would dilute the power of other states and increase the power of what used to be a single state if its 6 senators banded together on various issues. Presidential politics also condoned the proposal once it reached Washington. Vikram Amar, a law professor who has written extensively about Draper's plans, pointed out last fall that the shift in California's votes in the Electoral College, which have been awarded for a quarter century to Democratic nominees, will be split between 3 states, and one of those states, based on past election results, could be won by a Republican. Amar wrote that Democrats would be very reluctant to run the risk of supporting the proposal in Congress, and risk aversion looms large in these matters, which helps explain why no new states have been added to the United States in over 50 years, and no new state has been created out of an existing state for more than 150 years. He wrote, there also is a sizable debate about whether such a sweeping change can be created through a ballot initiative that is, whether it rises to the level of a reversion of the California Constitution, which can only be instigated by the legislature or by a formal institutional convention. Revisions, Amar wrote in 2017, are generally seen by the courts as the most substantial kinds of changes to a government. What is of greater importance to a state than its geographic boundaries? Amar wrote, as the national debate about a wall along the Mexican border rages, we are reminded that even in a digital age, physical space and physical lines matter immensely to the course of people's lives and the legal regimes under which they live. All right, I'm going to open up everything for you. So have at it.
Okay, so a couple of things. I didn't mean to interrupt there, but when you were making certain points, I wanted to just kind of make sure that those stuck out. One, this guy Tim Draper, he represents a tech think tank. Okay, that's the first thing I want to point out. Two, the guy has put up 4.9 million of his own money. Right, $4.9 million of his own money. So that means he's got $4.9 million to keep throwing at this shit. Okay. All right. The third thing is, if you look at the map, right? If you look at the map,
let me come back.
Yeah, if you bring the map up, I'll kind of go into kind of what the thought is behind all of this. And I mean, there's actual scenarios where I could feasibly say something like this playing out, but I would say by and large, Californians aren't going to support it.
Let me do something here.
Ooh.
Okay.
Wow, dude, that was a little head trip. All right. So you see there's Northern California, Southern California, and then there's California, right? All right, let me give you the thought between all three of these. Okay, Northern California, okay, that's where Tim Draper comes from. That's Silicon Valley. A lot of this largely has to do with if you split it up, right? Southern California and California don't get tech money, right? Tech money is made in Northern California now. See, in the state, tech money is made up in Northern California, but Northern California is part of the entire state. Entertainment money is made in Southern California, okay, in LA, or according to this right here, in California. But there's state tax and there's all these state revenues that contribute to the state economy. Now, here's what I'll say about what is outlined as Southern California. Outside of that small portion that you see that rides the coast there, like San Diego, so what you're looking at there is going to be like Orange County, Laguna Niguel, all of that, and then going further down south into San Diego, okay? Outside of that portion there, man, you see the rest of that stuff there? Yeah. That's that poor area that they were talking about.
Fresno and Bakersfield?
That's that poor area that they were talking about. Now, the only thing I can say for Southern California, because California, based on that map, is largely, those are moneyed individuals who are all living along the coastline and all that, and entertainment people, and Northern California, we've already determined, is largely tech money. Southern California it's mainly agriculture, right? But right now, you've got an issue going on right now with, basically immigrants not showing up to work.
What?
Well, look what's going on right now.
Oh, they kicking them out the country.
Yeah, this zero tolerance push that they're on has got people not showing up for work. So now the farmers are complaining. They're like, look, really, what's going on here? Okay.
What would happen?
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to ask what would happen to the tax revenue per new state.
Well,
then.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to go. So your tax now, let's look at, you split it up into 3 states. So that means that Southern California has to have some sort of primary commodity or some sort of something, you know, some sort of something, you know, to generate revenue for itself. That area is largely agriculture. It's largely agriculture, but then again, you know, if you have immigrants afraid to show up to work, you know, then, you know, there's a bit of a crunch that's going on right now. Now, outside of that, what Southern California, as it's outlined, could kind of pivot towards is hemp and cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know, so Southern California, yes, Southern California would be hemp and cannabis primarily, and renewable energies, because the further you start to go east in the Southern California, pardon me, you guys, that's when you start to get up into like the high desert areas, right? So you get a lot of high wind areas, stuff like that. So you can get a lot of wind farms. Some of the racetracks that I go out to are surrounded by wind farms. You know, so when you get out into the Southern California areas, that's what you've largely got. You've got agriculture, hemp, cannabis, renewable energy, stuff like that. Okay, maybe like some sports recreation type stuff. I mean, as it's laid out, there are things that Southern California could do because if you notice, there's a lot of space there. So there's a lot of things that could be done to utilize this. But as it is right now, this is actually the part of California that's suffering economically the most. It's this portion right here. I mean, quite frankly, it's all of California. But if you go into the Southern California portion, it's suffering. It's suffering economically. Northern California generates a lot of money. California, particularly Los Angeles, generates a lot of money.
Okay.
But if you break it up like this, all of that tech sector money, look, you can write. That's like that. You write your own rules up there at that point. It's its own state. It becomes like a techno state. That's what that's why I was pointing out who this guy Draper is. He's a tech shill, and I'm not exactly against the tech industry. I'm just saying that's what the plan is for Northern California. You can concentrate your tax base. You can concentrate the revenues that are generated from that portion of the state if you just cut the rest of the shit off.
And then you can also deny who can come live there from a race standpoint.
Exactly.
So Oakland would be totally gentrified.
It's well on its way to being gentrified right now.
And I'm imagining they would put all the blacks and Mexicans in Southern California.
That's where a lot of them already largely live, but yeah.
Then eventually SoCal would end up invading Los Angeles.
Well, no, actually, you got people fleeing like Los Angeles and going further out into that Southern California area where it's cheaper. No, I mean for resources. Oh, yeah. I mean, well, the thing is that Southern California, technically speaking, that's why I'm kind of throwing it out there. I'm kind of projecting a little bit, right? So let's just say if theoretically this did happen, okay, Southern California, its best bet would be to pivot heavily to hemp and cannabis and renewable energy. That would be like the two main things as a revenue generator. if this scenario were to play out, that's how I would run Southern California.
Now, question: where is wine country at?
That's in Northern California. That's up in Napa, up in Sonoma.
And the more arable farmland is in Southern California.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Southern California has a vast difference between we'll have both arable farmland and desert, windy deserts.
Yeah, you'll see when you start driving out. You drive out and you start getting out into the desert stuff. You just see all these massive wind farms and stuff.
When you really think about it, you look at that picture. It looks like the difference between North Korea and South Korea.
Yeah.
Yep. You know, but just so you guys know, like what the thought or the motivation behind this is it's basically to concentrate a lot of the a lot of the capital that's made, particularly up in Silicon Valley. It's just to concentrate it up there. If you don't have to share it with the bottom portion of the state, think about how much richer Northern California can pivot itself to be. California will largely, it'll it'll go on the whole tourism, entertainment, the typical stuff that LA has always had a draw for, right? And that whole portion right there. But yeah, Southern California, that's where it's basically would be outside of San Diego in Orange County. Take San Diego, Orange County, and maybe even Riverside County out of there. Everything else in there, man, right for the picking.
Now, would Northern California be a crypto hub?
Yeah. So I think everything. Yeah. Well, that's basically Northern California and California would. Southern California wouldn't. Southern California is rural, dude. It's rural. Again, except for the part of Southern California that actually rides the coast. That's like going to be San Diego, and then right above it is going to be Orange County. Okay. Like out those two parts, that would be largely like you could actually kind of put that with California, but not really. The reason why they included San Diego and stuff like that is because San Diego, there's a lot of tourism. They generate a lot of money in tourism. So if you put San Diego with California, let me tell you something. Southern California would be screwed.
And they won't have any access to the ocean either.
Yeah.
I think they.
So that's what I'm saying. They wouldn't generate that portion, or Southern California as a state wouldn't have any sort of like sea-based tourism revenue.
Right.
If you took Orange County and San Diego out the picture.
And I'm thinking they gave San Diego in this layout. They gave San Diego to Southern California. Give it a
right to do just that.
Now, what's going on with Monterey?
Up north?
Yeah, what's the Central California?
That would basically be the most northern point.
Now they could give San Diego to California and give Monterey to Southern California.
No, because Monterey makes a lot of money all along the coast, dude. All along the coast, it's all money along the coast. Like just take PCH and drive up PCH from LA to Frisco, and you'll see. It's all money. You go right past like Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, everything. Yeah, it's all money, dude. Okay. And that's why they split it up the way they did. Look at the size of California compared to Southern California. Look at that. You know why you can make California that small?
Why?
Because of the amount of money in it. I'm saying Southern California has to be that size because Southern California would have to make its money doing other things than what California does. Southern California, as it's laid out, again, you'd have to go hardcore agriculture, hardcore renewable energies, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But I don't see Californians voting for this shit. It's just another attempt by some rich billionaires, man, to try to concentrate wealth into a certain part of the state. That's all it is.
If Californians did vote for it, which part of California would you live in?
Yeah. Hello. I'm sorry. Say that again, Lionel.
I said if they did vote for it, which part of California would you live in?
I'd be in California.
Would you stay there?
I mean, that's kind of where my business is, man. It's kind of where I'm based and what I do, so. But I mean, I don't see it. I don't see Californians getting behind this, dude. I don't see that happening. I mean, you can even buy votes. That's why I asked you. I said, wait, he's paying for votes too? That shows you how hardcore it has serious. They've been trying to do this for years, man.
So, yeah, because since I read they've been trying to do it for years. That means it tells me it's going to happen one day.
Possible. That's why I was like, well, look, I'll give you my very realistic take on it. I'll give you my very realistic take on it because that is true. If you keep pushing at something, man, you know, at some point you're gonna get your way, right? So if this dude basically keeps pushing the narrative that, hey, look, if we split the state up into 3 states, and basically if you're a person whose assets are like based in, you know, the tech asset class or anything like that, look, I'm gonna tell you right now, man, there's gonna be a like Northern California will be super rich. Southern California will be super poor if it doesn't take my advice, and California will just be what it is.
Well, California has sports and entertainment, right? So it has the Lakers and the hockey.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It ain't gonna go nowhere.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll do exactly.
California would just have the Padres.
Huh? Yeah, San Diego will only have the Padres. That's it.
Yeah, that's
right.
No, but you still have the Dodgers, right?
Yeah, LA. Mm-hmm. That would be in California. So I'm saying California ain't going nowhere. It'll do exactly what it's doing. Northern California, however, see, the incentive in all of it is to enrich Silicon Valley. That's what the incentive in all of this shit is. Like, let's get right to the point. That's what this is about.
Well, I mean, what's going to happen from a water perspective? Because I know California is starving for water, right?
Okay. Well, here's the other thing, right? So Northern California sources its water from a different source than Southern California does. See, in Southern California, we share our water with Nevada, with like Las Vegas. Okay. Northern California has a different water source. See, so there's a lot of incentives, and there are some advantages to Northern California just basically splitting and going on its own. Like, you see where that line splits right there? At that point, Northern California has everything it needs to take care of itself. And it leaves the rest of the state to kind of figure it out with Nevada.
Hey. You broke it down right there, man. Yeah, that's what it is.
But yeah, just so you know, though, that's what it is, man. That's the tech industry driving this.
And they're gonna become rich if it happens.
Think about it. They would literally become the richest state in the nation.
Overnight.
Apple, Google, Waymo. Think about all the companies that are based there. It'd be the richest state in the nation.
It would be a snob state.
Yeah,
it would be a snob state. We would all have to relocate there by default.
By default. That's what I'm talking about. Well, any other points or topics?
No, that's all I got, man.
Well, thank you all for tuning in to As the World Turns.
Yes, sir.
Wednesday. At least I'm gonna ask you about some stuff. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to tune in Friday for Money Making Friday. And with that said, you all have a nice day.
Peace out.